last guest asks the first question, so it is yours.
Okay, here we go.
It's a mystery to both of us.
Oh, gosh. Okay, let's see here. If you knew you only had 1 year left to live, what would you do? Yeah, I've heard. I've in my younger days that we've played with this idea and stuff. First of all, I'd get my wife squared away.
We're good. Take it get squared away the right way in the sense of make sure finances, all of that type stuff.
Exactly. She's squared away pretty well with all the rest of the stuff, but I really want her to know the intimate details of the finances and stuff like that. She kind of defers all that stuff to me. Kind of spending more time with the kids, with my sister. My sister and I are pretty close, family, and that's pretty much about it. I can't think of anything else.
No major bucket list ideas or things that, like if it was literally today that you haven't done yet.
So let's say if I'm going to drop dead in a year, I'm fine until day 365.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. We love to travel. So we would do some bucket list trips to Europe. We've been to Europe several times, and we like the East Coast. One place we haven't gone, I think you've been to Vermont and that area of the country. Have you been over in that area at all when you were in New York?
I was not in Vermont. I've been out to the Cape. I've been through portions of Connecticut. I don't believe I've actually been in Vermont. I've been in Delaware.
Okay.
But
right.
Not deep into the upper Northeast.
Okay.
So, like I said, probably the most Northeast I've gone would be Cape Cod.
That we were in Cape Cod. Yeah, that's about as far as we went too. We spent the day there. Had a great time. Nice people.
I believe it's Vermont. I've seen a special where there's a church, I think it's Vermont, that actually sits on the border between the U.S. and Canada. Mm-hmm. And when parishioners who are from Canada come in, they can only come in a certain door and have to go back out that same door.
Really?
And then the same way with Americans. But while service is going on, they're all inside the church because apparently it literally splits the border.
Wow. That's weird. I've never heard of that before.
And I believe it's Vermont. I could be wrong, but it's obviously very far northeast.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I would do. My sister lives in Pittsburgh, and so we go back there occasionally to visit and see the areas around there. But yeah, that's kind of what I'd want to do. Get things squared away, and then do some traveling as much as we can until I check out.
Very cool. You mentioned the East Coast and your sister being in Pittsburgh, so let's use that as the segue. Where's hometown for you? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Culver City, California. Mom and dad, they were, dad was a carpenter, cabinet maker. And then mom was a clerk at the AAA, which was a few miles away from the house. So I grew up there. I grew up as an only child. My sister was a little bit older than me. So she was already out of the house and married and was starting to have kids by the time I was coming along.
In fact, you an oops?
I was an oops. Dad didn't quite make it to the drugstore that night. So some of my nephews are the same age as I am. So they're kind of like my quasi brothers. So we kind of grew up together.
Yeah, that's a big oops.
It's a big oops. Yeah. In fact, my sister shared baby clothes with my mom when I came around. So when my two older nephews outgrew their stuff, it was handed down to me. So that was a big oops. But I grew up in Culver City.
You can't tell me what to do. You're my uncle, but you're a year younger than me.
We still see each other to this day. Most of them still live back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And when we get together, we kind of start up where we left off as kids. And we talk about all the hijinks and shenanigans we used to get involved in. So fortunately, we all have our fingers and didn't lose an eye or anything like that.
How'd your sister end up in Pittsburgh?
So she married a physician. And she did the physician thing. Eventually, they moved out of California, and he wanted to chase, obviously, openings where he could get them. I think they went to El Paso, Texas first, spent a year there, and then eventually he had a job offer in Pittsburgh at UPMC. And he was there up until, 5 years ago. So they started their own diagnostic company, and that's what they're doing right now. So she went back to school. She eventually got 2 masters and a PhD, overachiever. And she basically helps him run the company.
Did she basically set the bar and now you got to try to match it?
Well, that's the thing. Well, we'll talk about education here in a little while, I guess. But yeah, they wanted me to go to law school after my transition out of law enforcement. And I had no desire to become a lawyer. I'd be terrible at it. So I said, at least I have to go back to school and at least get a master's degree at least. I did apply for a PhD at UC Irvine at one point. And I know that we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but they wanted me to do GREs all over again and stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And neither one of us are actually into titles. We're not into that. So in fact, to this day, people refer to her as Sherry. They don't call her Dr. Scalabasi.
Got it.
Yeah. So neither one of us are into that stuff. We're pretty down to earth.
So focusing on you as a young man, where did you spend your time? What was your interest? Sports, school?
I was never really into sports. It just didn't appeal to me. I just kind of did the kid thing. I grew up as an only child, had a few friends in the neighborhood. But one thing that happened to me one year, my sister for Christmas, I think I was 12 or 13 years of age. She got me a magic kit for Christmas. And I thought that was the best. And I kind of ran with it. And after, a year or so ago, I was actually doing magic shows as a kid for parties and a couple elementary schools and stuff like that. So I kind of really got into it. And I actually, at one point, if you remember, there was a show called The Gong Show.
Mm-hmm.
I actually auditioned for that show in Hollywood, not thinking what they really wanted to see. I didn't know till years later. They were looking for goofy acts, but I did a kind of a traditional magic act. My dad took me. He was a good sport, but he took me to these things, and so I did my traditional magic act, and they were very nice. Oh, thank you very much, and see you later. I don't know if I ever got a call from them or not, but obviously I wasn't on the show, and I didn't know till later on. I wasn't quite the act they were looking for, but it was a fun experience. I enjoyed it. So.
You hear all of the stories about Chuck Barris, the show itself, and almost, if I'm understanding the few documentaries I've seen, is almost kind of like as a front for everything else that was going on. But you wonder how much of it was actually true as to, I mean, I can easily imagine all of the drugs and alcohol, but the whole conspiracy side of things.
CIA agent.
Yeah.
Like that. I heard those stories. I don't know. I mean, I never met the guy. He wasn't there. His producers were doing all the auditions. I don't know. It seems pretty far-fetched to me. The guy was kind of a goofball, and he was very entertaining. But to have him work in secret, that's not real life.
Maybe that's a great cover. He's so crazy that
it might have been. I don't know.
Fly under the radar.
Yeah, but I had a good time. That's all that matters.
One of the questions I was going to ask you related to your sister and her education, and you mentioned that your family was kind of pushing you towards going into law, being a lawyer.
Yeah.
Where I wanted to kind of deviate that is back to as a young man. Your dad's a carpenter, mom's an office worker.
Yeah.
What were they pushing for you growing up as far as your academics or future life?
They really weren't. They were kind of the opinion, hey, do what makes you feel happy. And they didn't really suggest anything. They indulged me when I did have an interest in something, be it magic or railroading or whatever it was that had my interest at the time. They were very encouraging and supportive about it. So, but there was no pressure to do this or to that. There was no pressure at all. There really wasn't pressure from my sister down the road. She just said, hey, you might want to think about this. But yeah, I was grateful that my parents did not pressure me to go into any avenue of study or vocation.
That's actually a really, I'll call it a benefit for those kids whose parents didn't put that undue pressure on them for what adulthood would be. It's like,
Sure.
Hey, follow your own path, see what makes you happy. And, hopefully it's something that is prosperous for you.
Yeah. And I appreciated it. I don't know if that's how you grew up,
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I saw parents that would pressure their kids to go in a certain direction, and I kind of was repulsed by it. I was not comfortable with it, and I was lucky to have parents that didn't do that.
Coming out of high school, what was your plan for adulthood then?
So I had a plan before I even graduated. When I was 14, Mom and Dad went down the street to a community meeting, and it was a neighborhood watch program that was put on by the police department. And it was a community meeting, and kind of a meet and greet. When you were a cop, I'm sure you were involved in some of those things. And they came home and they said, hey, we're going to have some of the officers come to the house in a couple of days, and they're going to do engraving of our valuables with an engraver.
I remember those days.
Yeah. I thought, okay, whatever. Well, when they showed up, they weren't cops. They were police explorers. And they were about my age, and they had these police uniforms on, and they're coming in the house and they're doing their thing. And I thought, they're my age. That is cool. That is very cool. And I don't know if it was before or after. We had a friend that was a highway patrol officer. He was working out of Fallbrook. And that kind of got me interested into the old Adam and 12 series on TV. But it came on so late at night, I had to sneak out of my bedroom and turn on. But I thought, man, if they can do this at that age and have a uniform and everything, I'd like to do that. That sounds kind of cool. So I made some inquiries, and a buddy of mine, a friend of mine that lived in the city, not too far away from our house, he was interested in doing it too. So we contacted the police department, and they said, hey, sure, no problem. I think the youngest you had to be was 14, I think. And they said, you have to go through a Explorer Academy. And then after that, here's what we do. And the whole thing appealed to me. I loved it. So
Culver City PD,
yeah. So I remember I joined the post. I think there was an interview, but I joined, and then they gave me an academy date. Now, back in those days, the only Explorer Academy was at the Sheriff's Department, and it was at Biscaloo in East LA. And so every Saturday morning, thank you, my dad, he would get up with me at 5, whatever it was in the morning. He'd fix me breakfast, and then we would take off. Either he would take me to East LA from Culver City, or sometimes they would say, hey, just come to the police department and we'll have some officers take you in a van, a bunch of you guys, or whatever it was. So every Saturday I was there at the Sheriff's Academy at Biscaloo, and it was a little bit of a shock. About what they did. And there was only one time, though. Was it 18 or I think it was 16 or 18 week academy every Saturday. And there was only one time I really got angry at one of the drill instructors. I was sick. I wasn't feeling well at all, but I did show up. And this guy took no pity on me whatsoever. So he made me go around the grinder, pick up cigarette butts and all this other stuff. But he was kind of nasty about it. And I thought, I don't have to take this stuff. And I went home, thought about it, and I'm not going to quit over that. This is a one-time deal. But yeah, we got to do some cool stuff. We went to weapons training, got to shoot. They trained us how to use a baton, pull over and approach, lectures, all kinds of wazoo stuff. It was really a cool experience, just the academy itself.
What year is this?
So I graduated June of 78. I'm dating myself here.
Well, the only reason I say that is because, I started with my first law enforcement agency in March of 88. We had the Explorer program. They still had to go through an Explorer Academy. Mm-hmm. But I think about 1978.
Yeah.
And I think today, 2025, if somebody was going through, I would imagine, comparatively speaking, yours was probably a lot more stress and actually in your face than probably anything they do today.
It was
at 14 years old.
Even at 14. Now, when I went through the regular academy many years later, they were still doing stuff that would be definitely a no-no today. That was back in 85. But in 78, we were kids. And so I'm sure they toned it down. They didn't treat us the same way as regular deputy sheriff cadets, I'm sure.
Oh, for sure. Comparative to the time.
Compared to time, yeah.
The police academy to the Explorer Academy at that time was measurably night and day. I'm saying Explorer Academy 1978 and potentially Explorer Academy 2025.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, I would imagine you'd be sitting there going, what is this?
Yeah. It was very different. In fact, I was invited to be an observer at the Explorer Academy up in Santa Clarita with the Sheriff's Department. I was there for half a day. And I was looking around to see how they, treat these guys and stuff. And it seemed like it was a little bit better than how we got treated. We weren't abused or anything like that, but we definitely knew our place.
Were you a pretty squared away kid though at the time?
I think so. I didn't create problems for my parents or for law enforcement. To this day, people don't believe that neither my sister or myself never played with dope, never experimented. We didn't drink. I started drinking alcohol probably 17, 18. You take a couple sips or whatever. But we never got into crime. We never got in trouble with the police or drugs or gang. We didn't have gangs in Culver City at the time. So yeah, we were pretty good kids from a parental point of view.
Does that play back on? I'm assuming if your parents were very open with you about, hey, find your own life path.
Yeah.
To the same degree, they probably weren't as, I'll call it, strict. Drugs are bad. Don't ever do drugs. I'm assuming maybe it was kind of more, hey, there's drugs. They're not the best for you. And you not maybe making it as much of a taboo to where it potentially could draw you to it.
Right. Yeah, they were kind of like that. They didn't lecture me on drugs or alcohol. Yeah, I don't remember them ever actually having a conversation with me and sitting me down and saying, hey, drugs are bad. You shouldn't do this. I don't remember them ever doing that. I'm sure at some point along the way, they would casually mention, you shouldn't get involved in that stuff. But yeah, neither one of us had a desire to experiment with any of that stuff. The only thing my dad did tell me when I became of dating age, be careful, son.
Like you did, Dad.
Exactly. So that's the only pep talk he ever gave me. It may have been that my parents just assumed that I wouldn't. When you were growing up, sometimes you get a feeling, no, he or she is not, they're not going to get involved in that stuff. You just get a feeling. Do I need to have a talk with them? Nah, we'll just observe from a distance and see how things go. But yeah, that my childhood was pretty drama free. No domestic violence, none of that stuff. I was very fortunate.
My venture, I would say, into marijuana, alcohol, not necessarily because my dad was adamant about don't do drugs, but I was just butting heads with him so much as a young teenager. Mm-hmm. That was just another way to quote unquote rebel against him.
Yeah, that's understandable.
It's all part and parcel. It's all related to how you were raised and how you're treated by your parents, I think.
So you and my sister have probably a lot in common. She was the rebellious one. I wasn't. And she would get underneath their skin. She was always the why. Well, hey, Sherry, I need you to do this. Why? Used to infuriate my father. I would always say, sure, no problem. Just go with the flow. I don't want any trouble. Oh, no. Why? Why do I have to do that? It doesn't make sense to me. And it would just infuriate them. Just my mom and dad, they came out of the Depression, World War II, and that type of background, and don't question authority. So yeah, she had a different relationship with my parents than I did. So yeah, that's how it kind of went.
Now that I've got the ability to look back on being a parent, for me, if I could choose, I would much rather have a child that always says why. Mm-hmm. There are some times I'm going to tell just because dad said so. Yeah. And every once in a while you got to pull out that rule. But for the most part,
yeah,
I look at a kid almost kind of like that 20-year salt sitting in the back of the briefing room. If you tell them to do something, it's not that they don't want to do it. They just want to know the why.
Sure. Yeah.
We should encourage that in our children.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I've got 3 stepkids. My wife, this is her second marriage, my first. And some of the kids lived with us for a while when we first got married, but then they eventually moved out. as a stepfather, I didn't want to breach that that line. I'm not the real dad, but then again, hey, you're living in our house. There are certain rules and expectations, and they were pretty good about that. Even today, I'm very close to all three of them. We get together, and yeah, it's been a good relationship. But I kind of understand what you're talking about there.
Before that fateful day when you got to see what you thought was going to be police, but it turns out to be explorers.
Yeah.
Were you thinking a different path at that point in time in your life, or was it even really a thought of what you might do after high school?
No, it was the path. I think I was set on that path in my last year of high school. I was a police explorer through middle of junior high up and through graduation of high school. And I think the second to last year, my junior year, I knew that, this is the path I want to take. And so they started talking to the police department, started asking me about, do I want to become a community service officer?
Did they have a cadet program?
It's kind of like a cadet program.
But it wasn't titled cadet at that time.
Correct. Yeah. It's a full-time paid position, and you do non-hazardous type duties. And they can use you anywhere in detective bureau, patrol, parking enforcement, admin services. Oh, what else do they have? They had them spread out throughout the entire department. And I thought, really? Full-time job? That sounds pretty good. Kind of doing more than I'm doing now as a police explorer, but you're getting paid, you get benefits, and it's a whole thing. And so I applied for the job prior to graduating. And one of the things was you had to be a high school graduate. So I remember I graduated, I'm making up a day here, June 5th. And I think I started as a CSO on June 7th, the following Monday. And I did that for about 2.5 years and did a variety of assignments. And it really was a great experience where now you're working there full time, getting more experience, more exposure on to what this line of work is all about. And fortunately, I had some adult mentors there that took the time to kind of mentor me and kind of show me the ropes and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a great experience. That experience as a CSO just kind of further ingrained in myself, this is definitely the vocation I want to pursue. Yeah.
I was a cadet because our agency at the time didn't have CSOs, but it's the exact
same thing.
Yeah. It's a paid position. You're basically a glorified gopher. Mm-hmm. You're doing all of the ancillary stuff, work the front counter, let you take some basic, hey, my bike got stolen type, just generic stuff. You could assist in the detective bureau, processing evidence, all of those little things that doesn't need to be done by a sworn officer.
How long did you do that for?
2.5 years before I became a jailer/dispatcher.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we did the same amount of time.
The funny thing is you talk about how you applied while you're still in high school. So by the time I was coming towards the end of high school, I knew that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of get into law enforcement. I considered the military for a bit, didn't go that route. Mm-hmm. And so I started applying everywhere I could. And were you 18 before you graduated high school?
No, I turned 18 in February and then graduated in June. So 18 and a half.
So you were 18 when you graduated high school.
Correct. Yeah.
So was I. And I remember applying at the same police department. I remember applying for because they combined dispatcher and jailer. It was a single position.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so you would be cross-trained for both.
Yeah.
And I remember testing for them. I turned 18 in March, so I was probably testing around that period.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I'm just thinking, I'm an adult. I can apply for this job.
Sure.
And they actually, I'll guess, say that they kind of patted me on the head, so to speak. And they let me take the written test. They actually let me go through the first oral. But then at the end of the oral, they go, you understand this is shift work. It's 24 hours a day. How are you going to accommodate going to school as a high school student and still doing this job? And it's just something that just never kind of like just the weird kind of never crossed my mind to think about it that way.
Yeah.
So they said, when you graduate, come back.
And then you came back and then you picked you.
I started working for them in March of the following year. So if I graduated in June, I was working for them in March as a cadet.
Oh, okay. All right. We had at Culver City a dedicated jailer. I think we had two. One was a day shift and one was a night shift, I believe, if I remember right. But that's something else we would do. As CSOs, as community service officers, we would go in the jail and we would help book prisoners that would come in. Now, back then, we had the old-fashioned manual typewriter to do the booking slips. And actually, I took typing in junior high, so I could type these things out. So they would drop off their suspect. And if they weren't violent or anything like that, then we would just process them. And then we would book them. We would take their mugshot. We would do fingerprinting. If the person was, again, if they were squirrely or they had some problems with them, then, yeah, the officers would take over that job just in case the guy got aggressive and they'd do their thing. But yeah, we were doing all that stuff. We were booking prisoners, working the front desk, all that crazy stuff. Yeah, it was a good learning experience.
When it came time to actually make the transition and become a full-time police officer, did you want to stay with Culver City? Did you consider any other agencies?
No, Culver City was it. That's all I knew. I was born and raised there. I made lots of friends in the police department, other CSOs I worked with, other officers that took a liking to me. There was really no thought at that time to going anywhere else. I thought, no, I'm pretty comfortable here. I like it here. I'm familiar with the culture. I'm familiar with the way things are done, the personalities, the chief of police, which we talk about him a little bit. The way he ran the department was to my liking. And yeah, it was kind of home for me. So I thought, yeah, I had no desire to go anywhere else. So yeah. Applied for the position when I was 20 and a half. And yeah, they got the call and they said, yeah, you're hired.
I'm assuming back then Culver City was probably one of those agencies where there wasn't a lot of hiring. It was probably ones and twos as
Correct.
Opposed to 10s and 20s.
Yeah.
So you had to kind of, I don't want to say fight for your spot, but when the spot came available, it's like there wasn't a lot of thinking about it.
Correct. Yeah. We were only at the time, I think 105 sworn. And the bedroom community of Culver City was about 40,000. So probably, I don't know if you call it a mid-sized city or smaller mid-size. So yeah, there was only a couple of positions that came up, maybe 3 or 4 positions a year, maybe if that. So yeah, when they come up, you got to grab them and go for it. So the timing was good. I did the CSO position for about 2.5 years, and then the position came up, or they said, hey, look, we're looking at hiring in the future here in 6 months, start thinking about it. And I started hearing more and more. And that's when I started getting in shape, anticipating, hey, I think I have a shot at this and I better be ready. Because people told me, if you start applying with us and we hire you, you might get a 2-day notice. Hey, it's Friday. You're going to the academy on Monday. And that's I don't know if it probably happened in your career. We saw people do that too.
Well, you're already an employee of the city. So the process to get you onboarded and check a different box from CSO to police officer is not a lengthy process.
Yeah.
Maybe an updated background. Yeah, you probably had to go talk to the psychiatrist. But other than that, it's a fast process.
It was pretty fast because my background was pretty quick. There wasn't a lot there. I didn't jump around jobs. I went to the same school, lived in the same city. All my work history, well, most of it was at Culver City Police Department. So they knew me.
Yeah.
I don't think I took a lie detector test back then, a polygraph.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't think it was common back then.
It wasn't. It was kind of an option if they had someone they weren't quite sure about. But I didn't take a polygraph. Pretty sure I took a psych. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But it was
not that. Have you seen the current one that's like
no
9 million questions on a computer? Mine was just, hey, go talk to the psychologist.
I did take the MMPI test at the sheriff's department when I lateraled.
Oh, okay.
That was back in the 80s. And I did take a polygraph for that lateral transfer. But yeah, Culver City, no. I think I was lucky in that they knew me, they knew everything about me, and yeah, I went really quick, very quick.
I tell people all the time, I'm very fortunate. So you and I have a very similar path, how we came up through our organizations.
Sure.
And I was very fortunate because I had already kind of established myself that they were willing to look out for me. Because when I went to do the medical screening to be a police officer, there was the one added component that they hadn't done when I was a cadet, which is the color blindness test.
Yeah.
And I go into the hospital and they give me the dots and I'm like, I see dots. Mm-hmm. What am I supposed to see?
Yeah.
You don't see the numbers? No.
Mm-hmm.
And so went back and it's like, basically you failed the color blindness test. And I was like, shit, now what am I going to do? And I was fortunate at the time, the lieutenant in charge of hiring, instead of just shit canning my file, she made some phone calls and actually called Post up in Sacramento, and they go, well, there's this other test that will test for basically degrees of color blindness.
Yeah.
And so she found an eye doctor that gave this test that was certified by Post. I went and took it, aced it. So it was just that subtle, with the dots screwed me up. But what I'm getting at is, had I not already been at that agency, it would have been very easy to say, hey, you failed the color blindness test. Go find somewhere else.
Well, I was going to say, they wanted you really bad because they knew you and you were probably an outstanding candidate. Yeah, the other person they don't know, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go the extra mile to do that. So, yeah, good for you. It's nice. It's nice that people still do stuff like that.
Yeah.
You don't hear about that too much.
You mentioned BC. So did you go to BC for the academy too?
Not BC. So at the time when I got hired, Culver City was using 2 academies. It was whatever, which one came up first, Rio Hondo or the Sheriff's Department. And I heard horror stories about Rio Hondo, horror stories. And I thought, oh God, please don't let me go to Rio Hondo.
But not as bad as Orange County Sheriff's horror stories back then.
Yeah, I didn't hear any. I did apply to that agency at one point, but I didn't hear any horror stories. The only horror I heard about that is with the Sheriff's Department. They made you run in the sand on the beach, and I tried that one time, and it was extremely difficult. But it was either Rio Hondo or the Sheriff's Department. I was very lucky. They said, okay, the Sheriff's Department has a class coming up next week. You're going to be in it. And at that point, the Sheriff's Department just transitioned from their academy from BC to
Star Center.
Whittier. Yeah, Star Center. I think we were the second class to go through Star Center, and everything still looked like a high school, except the pool was drained. So, but everything was.
It was still drained when I went through there.
What class were you in?
280.
280. Okay, so I was 225. And yeah, it was just a basic high school. They had people move into some offices and stuff, but that was pretty much about it. They were just getting the track and field that was next door to that. They were still working on getting that done. So we would go there for our PT training and stuff. But yeah, that's where I was for the next, 16, 18 weeks, whatever it was, at the Sheriff's Department. Yeah.
Once you were out on your own, everything... I'm sure you probably went on quite a few ride-alongs while you were a CSO, and besides just probably being able to do field work yourself, what was it like actually now being a cop out on your own?
It was scary. I was not prepared for what was expected of me, and I wasn't that aggressive in the sense of like physical aggressive. When I wasn't at that point. A lot of officers probably experience this. You're so new, you're so young, and you're dealing with these people that are career criminals that have no qualms about using violence to, get what they want. I was very naive about recognizing some of those clues on when someone should be taken down to the ground or physically restrained. So I remember a training officer I had pulled me aside and said, hey, yeah, it's okay to be aggressive. If they're giving you trouble, it's okay to, take control of the situation and do that. And so I learned very quickly that, okay, when is it appropriate to do something like that? When is it not appropriate? And fortunately I had one or two, I had a couple training officers back then. And the one training officer who I was with for a short time, really taught me when to notice those subtle clues. So, yeah, but it kind of reminded me of one of the drill instructors in the academy who talked about when officers get in over their head. And he said, well, heck, as soon as you hit the street out of the parking lot, you're in over your head. You're pretty much on your own, because by the time help arrives, the situation's going to be over, good or bad. So yeah, it was scary, especially when they let me out on my own. After 4 months, I was still on training for 6, but after 4 months, they made a decision. Okay, we can let this guy loose. But even then, they put the guardrails on me, and they said, "You're a report card. That's all we want you to do is go out there and take crime reports out in the field." don't look for trouble. Respond to help calls, but that's all.
Was that a normal part of training for Culver City at the time?
I think so. I think I remember that. Yeah. They wanted to ease you into things. And after 6 months, then I made it off training and 1 year off probation. And at that point, you're a new cop. You kind of get the feel for how things go in the field. So, yeah.
Well, and the other thing, too, is you've referred to, from when you grew up, Culver City being a bedroom community.
Yeah.
But it butts up to some not so good cities, right? Aren't you butting up to Gardena?
So we were surrounded by LA City. We butted up against or close to Inglewood. We butted up against the county where the Sheriff's Patrol, Ladera Heights, and Marina Del Rey. And I think that was it. So Wilshire Division, LAPD, Pacific Division, LAPD, are the LA City areas we butted up against. What our problem was, we didn't have a lot of violence in the city. We only averaged about maybe 3 murders a year. But the majority of crime was committed by people coming from outside, committing their crimes, and then taken off again back to wherever they came from. The vast majority of the crooks we were dealing with didn't live in the city. We technically didn't have gangs. The gangs were on the peripheral. And so they would come in, do their stuff, and then, we would go after them. So that was mainly how it worked in Culver City.
Yeah, so your problems were transient, not in the sense of homeless people, but transient in that they were moving through your city.
Correct.
But they were legitimate gangsters from surrounding cities immediately adjacent to you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we would have the Rolling 60s gang members, the crack cocaine epidemic, and all the violence that came with that was about the same time I was a cop in Culver City. And so we had the gangs, the Crips and the Bloods, they would come down into Culver City and hang out at one of the malls, local malls, and then they would cause trouble there. So yeah, we had some of the hardcore gangs that would come into the city, start trouble, but they'd take off. They'd go back. But again, we didn't have a lot of violence. It was mainly property crimes, robberies, but mainly committed by people that live outside the area. That was typically the pattern.
At that point in time, did you have much street level stuff as far as dope sales, prostitution, anything like that in your city proper?
We had dope sales, but nothing outrageous, nothing to the level I saw when I transferred to the sheriff's department. We had one street that was known for drug sales, and we did work that street. I worked it undercover a couple times, not too often. But yeah, it compared with other areas of LA, it was fairly quiet. There were times where you would work PM shift and maybe get a handful of radio calls, during your shift. It was, it was kind of a bedroom community. We had drug sales. We did have some prostitution. I think most of the prostitution we have were people working in the hotels. One of the areas that we like to work. In fact, another experienced officer told me this. Showed it to me, excuse me. He taught me how to work the motels in our area. Now, these were typically your seedy motels. People stay there a couple nights and they bail. But it was just a cesspool of crime at these motels. I was kind of shocked at what goes on there. I mean, dope, prostitution, stolen property, stolen cars in the parking lot, harboring fugitives.
All the good old days.
You could go through the parking lot and just run license plates, and you're going to have a G ride come up. It's going to happen. So we learned how to work the motels and how to, legally get into the rooms and start sniffing around and what's going on here. That was fun because one of the things our chief, Ted Cook, he's still alive. He's still out there. Ted Cook, he wasn't risk averse like we see some executives today. He encouraged us to go out there and make probable cause arrests and to be aggressive in the sense of going out there and looking for stuff. And he said, yeah, go out there and start, shaking cars, try to develop probable cause arrests, either dope or robbery or whatever. He was really big on that. So he was very encouraging to go out and do proactive police work. Now, that was back in the 80s. Now, no, times have changed a little bit in certain parts of the country.
You're taking me back, though, because I remember starting as a young cop in the early 90s. Man, you'd clear briefing, especially, as a young cop, you're working weekend nights.
Yeah.
Man, the sergeant would be like, my jail's empty. I want people in jail.
Yeah.
Go find them.
That's what it was like. The other thing I want to say about our chief was that he was ahead of his time regarding civil liability. He wasn't risk averse, but he taught us some ways to limit our exposure to civil liability. Lawsuits happened back in those days, if you remember, but they weren't as prevalent as they are today. So he would do some things, teach us things to limit our exposure. And then one of the things he did that he had all his commanders and supervisors do is to recognize when a commendable restraint was needed, as far as to recognize this officer or officers, commend them for the restraint they exercise in a violent confrontation. His idea was, write these commendable restraints, these memos, these reports, and give them to the officers, put it in their personnel package when it's appropriate. Because when eventually you do get sued, and all cops will be sued at some point, it goes with the job, like doctors, they're going to be sued for malpractice. It's going to happen. You have a pattern in practice you can show at either a deposition or if you go to trial. Hey, this officer's background, he has 6 commendable restraint letters from the department showing that he could have used, a lot of force, but he didn't. He was measured and restrained. So he had self-control. So he wanted us to use those as a tool to show later on, hey, these guys are not going out there and just, breaking heads for no reason. They're highly trained. They use restraint in whatever they do. So he was ahead of his time back then. I didn't see that type of practice when I lateraled to the sheriff's department. It was almost, they didn't know about civil liability back then. It was different. And
playing devil's advocate, you went from an agency that was 100, 110 to several thousand.
Right.
It gets a little bit harder. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying, you didn't take a gradual step. You took a huge leap in the size of an organization. But one of the things that's different for you and I is, yes, I was working in law enforcement leading up to the Rodney King riots. Yeah. You were already a cop, and then the riots happened. So I remember being in the academy and the riots kicked off.
Yeah.
And so when I came out, I was fortunate to be taught and learn from officers that still had the mentality, and again, a chief in an organization that said, hey, go take care of business.
Yeah.
But that, remember, vicarious liability all of a sudden became the buzzword.
Sure.
And I remember they were really pushing of take care of business, but when business needs to be done, then stop.
Right.
And that's why today when I see people get kind of, I'll call it nutted up about doing law enforcement, you can still do law enforcement today. You can go out, you can have fun, take a lot of people to jail.
Yeah.
Just make sure you do it within policy.
Right.
That's, at the end of the day, that's your bread and butter. What does your department say you can and cannot do in a given situation?
Right.
You understand it. I'll loosely say this, for the most part, you're golden.
Right. Yeah. The other thing I noticed he would do that the sheriff's department at the time did not do, and maybe your department did this, if we got into a physical confrontation with somebody, you were not to transport that person anywhere, not to the hospital, not to the station to book them. Basically, those 2 officers, that officer that got into that physical fight, you're taken out of it. Now you have to have other officers come to the scene and transport that suspect to the hospital or the station. He didn't want to be accused of officers stopping along the side of the road and tuning this guy up again on the way to the station or the hospital. So that was actually policy. He actually put that in writing. And we kind of, that sounds good. Sounds reasonable. And that was our practice.
We didn't have that as a policy, but now that I think back on it, how many times when we did get somebody into custody, the sergeant would go, hey, I'm going to get somebody else to transport him.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you're so wrapped up in the moment and starting to think about, okay, I got to write this and I got to do that. And, oh, okay. Yeah, great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it was normal for us. It was to be expected. Okay, that's fine. Sounds good. We know, going back to our conversation, we know why you're doing this.
Now
it's for our best interest.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, he was way ahead of his time. A lot of number of things.
So you mentioned a lateral change over to the sheriff's department. What facilitated that? What drew you to want to leave Culver City?
We had a few friends of ours working as officers in the department, and one in particular, he lateral to the sheriff's department, and he went to Men's Central Jail, and then eventually went out to Firestone Patrol Station.
Very quiet station.
He would come back with stories, and we would occasionally meet up for coffee.
You've got a lot of coffee options out there. You've got a lot of veteran and first responder-owned coffee companies as well. Trident Coffee is one of these companies, but they're different. Trident fuels your body and mind with a premium cold brew that's infused with powerful ingredients for performance, focus, and wellness. Made with organic MCT oil, lion's mane, and reishi mushrooms, this isn't just coffee. It's fuel for your brain, ensuring smooth, steady energy with no jitters and no crashes. Plus, the cocoa powder adds antioxidants, and the electrolytes keep you hydrated and balanced. Yes, they are cold brew experts, and their beans are brewed for cold brew optimization. But what does that mean for those of you who also love hot coffee like me? Their coffee tastes amazing, not bitter. So enjoy it hot or iced, mixed into your protein shake, or take it on the go. However you drink it, Trident Coffee is coffee upgraded. Get yours now at tridentcoffee.com and use the promo code TDP15 for 15% off your order. That's TDP15 for 15% off your order. Stay sharp, stay fueled, stay ready.
And he would tell us it's the wild, wild west out there. If you want to be an old town sheriff and dealing with the cowboys coming into town, this is the place to do it. And he would tell us all these stories, capers he got involved in. We thought, wow, nothing like that happens here. So a few of us.
Back in those days, you just had to drive down the street and almost fell in your car.
Oh, yeah. It was, I'll tell you, my first night at Linwood I was shocked. So a couple of us started thinking, at Culver City, nothing really is going to change that much. And the other thing about Culver City that a lot of us didn't like, but that was the chief's pet peeve. When you took a specialized assignment, it was only good for 3 years.
Same. God.
Was it like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know how you guys responded to that.
On paper, all of our specialized assignments were 3 years.
Yeah.
If you did a really good job, more than likely you're going to get extended 4. But for the most part, 4 years was every once in a while, blue moon, you'd have somebody that might stretch it out to 5. That was me when I was in the detective bureau. I got to 5 and I was trying to do everything I could to pigeonhole myself to be able to stay.
Yeah.
And it just, the writing on the wall is there. It's like, we don't keep permanent positions here. You're going to go back out to patrol.
Yeah. Yeah. The exact same thing in Culver City. In fact, my chief and your chief probably knew each other. Yeah. 3 years. That was it. You get rotated back into patrol. If you wanted to promote, you were expected to get a college degree.
Oh,
that was the expectation. I don't think on paper.
Was college required to get hired?
No.
See,
diploma.
We were required to have a 2-year to get hired.
Oh, even really?
To get hired, we had to have a 2-year.
Wow, that was ahead of the times. Yeah, I don't know too many departments that had that requirement back then.
They've since amended it to just a comparable number of units.
Right. LAPD did the same thing. So a lot of us started thinking, well, even if we got a specialized assignment, which I did, I worked the crime impact team prior to actually leaving. A small department, you have to wait till someone dies to get promoted or do whatever. And this buddy of ours was telling us all the cool stuff, all the different assignments you could work. And once you get that assignment, the sheriff's department, you can keep it for as long as you want, unless you get in trouble and you get benched, but you can keep it. So we made the decision. There were 3 of us, 3 additional folks besides him that said, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. So I think I was the first, and I pulled the trigger. And everything went fine. I lateraled to sheriff's department. And then one of the first things they did was, okay, you have to do jail time. So I lived in Castaic Lake at the time. They were going to send me to the Hall of Justice. And I said, hey, look, I live right across the street from Pitches Center. can you give me some love here? I mean, come on. And very nice lady. She goes, yeah, no problem. We'll send you to the East facility. And so I did my jail time at East. I was there for about a year, and they gave me credit for street time. At the time, normally they would have, at the time, I think guys were doing, 3 years in jails. That was the time. And if it fluctuates. So 3 years, I did 1 year at East facility, and I was ready to go. Working full time in a jail facility like that, it gets depressing after a while. That's all you deal with is knuckleheads. You don't deal with the public. You don't deal with nice people. Well, the only nice people there are your fellow coworkers, but it was a closed environment. Back then they could smoke. And so we were sick. Every month we came down with something, either chicken pox, strep throat, pink eye. One guy came down with meningitis. That was pretty serious. But every month we would catch something because we're inhaling the same air and it wasn't filtered. It was just, it was not a miserable experience. I did learn a lot about inmates and custody procedures and stuff. But after a year, I was ready to go. I think I've seen enough here. I'm pretty much done.
When you went to the sheriff's department, how many years in were you at that point?
So from the jail?
No, like being an officer, how long were you a cop before you went to the sheriff's department?
Oh, so I had 2.5 years as a CSO, 3.5 as a cop, and then I lateraled to the sheriff's department. Yeah.
So enough that you've established a little bit of experience. And where I'm going with this is I've always held that I thought from the sheriff's perspective, you go through the academy, you become a deputy.
Yeah.
And then the first thing they do is put you in the jail.
Right.
And you never really know if that person's going to make it as a good street cop.
Sure.
Where I always thought, man, put them out on the road for a year.
Yeah.
Make sure that they're going to be able to do the basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Get them a little bit of, like you've already said, let them see that there's another side of this world where there are people out there who like us and not everybody we're going to deal with is a criminal.
Yeah.
Then bring them back in and give them a year or two in the jail because it's a great learning environment for dealing with criminals.
Yeah.
So you kind of got the best of that both worlds. You got to do the street for a few years, but I would imagine the catch-22 to that is you already like, man, I know what the street's like. Let me just get through this and get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. I did learn a lot about criminals because in our facility, we were fortunate. So the way East facility, it was a maximum security facility at the time, but they were dorms. You'd have about 130 inmates per dorm. And one deputy for your 8-hour shift, you would be responsible for that dorm area. Back in those days, Mexican Mafia, Southsiders were not in control of any facilities in the county jail. So pretty much deputies were still in control. So you have this dorm of 130 inmates for 8 hours. And your job is to make sure that obviously they don't kill each other. They get released to go to, pill call or visitation or whatever the heck they're doing, religious services, whatever they're doing. But what you got a chance to do, you could pull them out and say, hey, why are you here? He goes, I caught a dope case. Well, tell me about it. And one guy in particular, I asked him, he was a heroin addict. Well, tell me how you use. Tell me, because we saw dope in Culver City, but not a lot like I saw in some of the areas I worked later on. So you could pull these inmates out and ask them, what are you here for? Well, I rob people. Really, when you rob people, what do you look for? They won't talk about their case, which is fine, but they'll tell you, yeah, this is kind of what, homeboys look for and this and that. We had one guy there, the onion field killings. Not Powell, but his partner. I can't remember the guy's name yet.
I'm drawing a total blank on it right now.
He was a hardcore drug addict, even at the time. And for some reason, he did not get a life sentence. He wasn't the trigger guy that murdered the officer in the onion field. So he got some time, but he was in and out of jail the rest of his life for drug use. He happened to be there when I was there. So I told the other deputies, I go, do you know who that guy is? No. That's the guy that was involved in the onion field killings. Let's drag him out. So we drag him out, and you might want to, bribe him with some chow from the chow hall, kind of loosen him up. We took him into another room and we interviewed him. Hey, tell us about your life ever since, what happened, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, just a gold mine of information. Here's the guy that a famous book was written about and a famous case where an LAPD officer was murdered. And here's the guy, not the trigger guy necessarily, but he was involved in it. Interview this guy, see what you can get out of him. You know, what his lifestyle's like and this and that. So I would try to encourage officers to do that. You're sitting around just babysitting these guys for 8 hours.
If you're stuck working in jail as a correctional officer, take advantage of it. Learn how to talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the most part, they were pretty cooperative. We didn't treat them like crap. You know, you show them a little respect and you'd be amazed at what you get in return.
They understand you have a job to do.
They do.
As long as you don't overstep it, and they've got a job, they've got their job to do.
Yeah.
In the sense of they're there to do their time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is a gold mine of information.
It's kind of like a university of crime.
Yeah. Because the flip side is they're furthering their knowledge too by talking to their buddies about other crimes and everything else. So everybody's kind of in it is a college environment. They're all learning.
It is definitely a college environment. Yeah. So I did that for a year. And what the sheriff's department does, a few months before your time's up, they'll come out with a wish list of where you want to go. And I'm going to the ghetto. I want a ghetto station. So you put down, I think it was 6 choices, but they try to give you one of the top 3. So the first one was Firestone. The second one was Linwood, I think. And the third was East LA. All high activity places. And so my other 2 friends, they got Firestone. I got Linwood, which is kind of a runner-up, but still, though, very, as we'll discuss in a minute, a very violent area. And so when you ask for a fast station back in those days, you would get out sooner. If you just want to go to Malibu and just kind of cruise, you might stay in custody a little bit longer. So, but that's kind of how it worked back then. Yeah. And so, I got the nod, and they said, okay, you're going to Linwood, but we're going to send you to patrol school first, a 3-week patrol school to brush up on stuff that maybe you missed.
Do things the sheriff's way. And not really for me, but for people that didn't go out patrol, kind of a refresher of what you learned in the academy. So I went to patrol school for 3 weeks, did role playing and all that good stuff. And was patrol school back at Star Center? It was. And we also would meet at Universal Studios. They had an agreement with the sheriff's department. They were allowed to use their backlots for role playing. So we did stuff like that, pullover approach, building searches, things of that nature. So that was fun. That was a lot of fun. And then, went to my first night at Linwood on New Year's Eve. From your family's perspective, any reservations about you going from, I'll call it quiet bedroom city to now, the ghetto? I don't think so that I remember. They were a little bit, I know my mom was a little bit hesitant about me being a cop in general. Dad was very proud. They were kind of sheltered. I don't really think they knew what the ghetto meant. I didn't want to tell them. Got it. I didn't want to tell them. Just some things you don't need to know about, Pops and Mom. So I don't think we ever had that discussion. They never said anything about it. Just going back to the time in the jail, any point in time during that year where you went, ooh, made the wrong decision, I should go back? Oh, to Culver City? No, not at all. Not at all. I was firmly, this is the right decision. I feel great. Never hesitation whatsoever, because I knew that I'm only going to be here for a year and eventually I'll go to patrol. And I thought, if I can make it at a fast station, I can be a cop anywhere in the United States, because really you're going to see a lot in a very short period of time. And I had friends in the department. I actually, in the jail, saw a couple of my original classmates that were in the academy with me. Back in those days, you could extend in the jail if you wanted to make money, because there was unlimited overtime, basically. Some guys just worked overtime. They were building a house or they wanted toys. And so they would ask, hey, can I extend for another year or two? And they said, sure, no problem. So they were there. So I saw a few classmates of mine that were in the academy with me. The longest I ever saw was 9 years after I was out. Remember I used to have to go down to BC? No, why am I thinking the main county jail? Oh, IRC or Men's Central Jail. Men's Central Jail. Yeah. God, but what's the street? Bauchette.
Boucher, yeah.
You'd go down there for parole hearings.
Mhm.
And I remember going in for a parole hearing and running into a classmate of mine who was on 9 years in. But it was exactly that. It was, I can make so much overtime guaranteed staying here.
Right.
I don't want to go to patrol. And I heard shortly afterwards, it was like, you need to go to patrol.
Yeah. You had, back in those days, you had to get patrol certified to be able to stay on the department. My understanding is years down the road, they modified that. Apparently now you can take two paths. If you want to stay in the jail, you can as a deputy. That's my understanding right now. But you're never going to be patrol certified. You're limited where you can go. The other path is you do your jail time, then you go to patrol, get patrol certified off training, and then you can do whatever you want to do.
Was your motivation to go to the sheriff's department for special assignments or promotion or both?
I think it was both, and the opportunity to work in those fast areas because we had heard the level of activity there. It was just incredible. You just see a lot. And we knew deputies from the Marina Del Rey station and actually Lenox station, another kind of a ghetto station. They would sometimes come into Culver City, and we always got along well with the sheriff's department, with the sheriff's deputies. And I went on a couple ride-alongs when I was a cop at Culver City with the sheriff's office at a Lenox. I was shocked how aggressive they were. They didn't take a lot of guff from people. And I thought, wow. So I thought, if I can make it as a deputy in those high, activity stations, then it kind of, in the sheriff's department culture, when you work at a fast station like that, like Firestone or Linwood or East LA or Lenox, then you start building your reputation as a go-getter. You're not causing problems, and you're generating work, and then that leads to specialized assignments. One of the ones that's coveted is homicide. Mm-hmm. So we have some friends of ours that ultimately wanted to go to homicide, but they look at your background. How did you work as a training officer? How did you work? Where did you do your patrol time? And that's one of the first things that in our culture, when you meet a deputy and you don't really know this person, one of the first things you're going to ask him,
where's your first duty station? Where'd you
train at?
Yep.
If they say Malibu or Pico, see ya. But yeah, so that's kind of the culture of the sheriff's department. So I always knew I wanted to go there. It's kind of like you want to prove to yourself, let's see if I can actually make it as a deputy in those fast, high activity areas, because that's really the test, if you can actually perform with all that stuff going on.
And that, I know it's 2025 and people have differing views on it, but those traditions, that history within the sheriff's department of, hey, what was your first duty station?
Sure.
And then being able to then backtrack and kind of go, hey, what kind of cop was he when he first hit the road?
Yeah.
That is something that you really stake your reputation on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right out of the gate, you want to be careful how you conduct yourself, because later on down the road, you do want maybe some specialized assignments. There's one deputy I knew of that wanted to go to SEB, or equivalent of SWAT team. Mm-hmm. He had a traffic collision, and apparently there was some debate about this, whether it was preventable or not. But I think ultimately they ruled it preventable. Now, no one died, no one got injured, but because of that was one of the factors why they didn't select him. Like, man, you had a TC. It's like, we have some other guys here that have a clean record. We're going to go with them. Something, very simple like that. So they were very selective. So not only do you want to work at a fast station, especially for a place like SEB, where they do draw deputies from those fast areas because they have a lot of experience dealing with violence. And with SEB, that's all you deal with is violent offenders, going out to calls and stuff like that. But you still have to have a clean record. You're not going out there breaking China when you're doing this stuff. Yeah.
They trust me, they've got a lot of people knocking on the door asking to be on the team.
Yeah.
And so if you give them that little piece, like, oh, we can move on from you to somebody else.
Right.
That's on you.
Well, where you worked, did you have a SWAT team or something equivalent to that?
So we had a tactical warrant team right up before I left. And just as I was leaving, they were transitioning to a multi-agency actual SWAT team, which they have since grown.
Gotcha.
So I didn't end up going to SWAT school till after I left and went to my second agency.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of some of the reasoning why some guys and women would go to those fast stations. So, yeah.
You mentioned you got involved in a shooting, which kind of was the turning point for you. How long did that into your career was that?
So that was summer of 91. So I was a deputy at Linwood for almost 2 years when that happened. So is that what we're going to turn to next? Is
if there's a point between kicking off with Linwood and that's poignant that you want to share, obviously have at it.
When I first went to Linwood, I was shocked at the violence level there. I had never seen anything like it. We averaged about one. I'm setting that in context for what I experienced. We averaged about one murder a week. And those are the people we couldn't save. We had shootings every day. Just a very violent area, infested with gangs. Linwood was responsible for patrolling the city of Linwood and East Compton and Willowbrook, which is basically Watts. Very dangerous area. We've lost some deputies down there. We had one deputy that was murdered in Nickerson Gardens. He was sniped at from a window. And then another deputy that I used to work with after I left Linwood, he was murdered on a simple traffic stop, a pedestrian stop. Other deputies that were wounded in gunfights. We averaged about one officer-involved shooting a month.
Is Nickerson Gardens Sheriff Patrol or LAPD patrolled?
It's LAPD.
Okay.
We would go poaching occasionally when things were slow. It was right there on the border, so it was Central and Imperial. So the sidewalk into Nickerson Gardens was LA City. Everything south of that was county that we would be responsible for.
Got it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I was actually kind of shocked at the brutality of what people do to each other down there. I wasn't quite ready for that. And deputies were aggressive. I mean, back in those days, we didn't take a lot of guff from people. If you went with the program, no problem. You're good. But yeah, it was, and it was almost like the community expected it. There were a lot of good people that lived in those areas, and they wanted the deputies to be aggressive in dealing with the crime that was going on down there. So it was a different time. It was a very different time.
I still remember a guy who took into custody, and he was, your typical 415 mouthing off with everybody, spitting on everybody. We had him in a spit bag. And like Culver City, it was like, we're not going to hold you. We're just going to take you down to county jail.
Sure.
So the whole drive all the way down, he's just chipping in the back seat. Boy, as soon as we opened up that back door at CJ, and he realized where he was, you thought he found Jesus. It was like, oh, and he went with the program. They walked him in, gave us our cuffs back. You guys have a good evening.
Yeah. We had at Culver City, we had a great relationship with the sheriffs. LAPD, not so much. That's another story. But with sheriffs, we had a great relationship. So working Linwood for the 2.5 years or 2 years I was there at the station, getting off training, and then working the areas. It was a pretty violent area. I was surprised at the level of violence. But after a while, you kind of got used to it. You get numb to it. I mean, I'm a dog lover. I don't know how many dogs I saw get killed down there because a lot of dogs, vicious dogs, would run wild. And it would kill me to see a dog, get killed that was running out into traffic. But after a while, you kind of get numb to it. It's like, that's the way it goes. But yeah, it's a different environment. Some of those areas that, have policing services, and you're sometimes dealing with people that don't have the same values as you do, and it's kind of a shock. So, but I did fine. Everything was fine down there. And then in the summer of 91, I was approached by one of the sergeants in the station and said, "Hey, we have this exchange program that we do with Marina Del Rey, where they send us one of their guys for 3 months, and we send one of our people to that station for 3 months. just a simple exchange and, do whatever. You want to do it? I thought, really? Go to Marina Del Rey. All my buddies are still there at Culver City. I could run into them and chat with them. It's a totally different environment. I'm single at the time. The marina, the boats. Yeah.
Sounds like a horrible detail.
Sure, let's do it. And so I get transferred down to Marina, temporary assignment. And I didn't work the marina all the time because the way the areas that Marina Del Rey patrols, it's not just the marina. They have an unincorporated area of the county called Ladera Heights, which basically goes from Culver City's southeast border all the way to Crenshaw. So some of the areas are nice, other areas not so nice. So that was the area that I found myself in the most of the time. Typically working day shift, day and PMs. I don't think I ever worked early mornings there. And then I kind of did it as a rest where, hey, I'll handle my radio calls, but I'm not out to set the world on fire. I'm just kind of taking a break from what's going on at Linwood, because over there you do earn your money. In fact, getting back there, I don't think I ever got off on time when I was working Linwood Patrol. A handful of times, maybe. And back in those days, when you got off late, you typically wouldn't put in for overtime. It was kind of frowned upon. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like your donation to the county.
Wow. Yeah, those days are gone.
A different time. Yeah, a different time. So, so anyway, so I went to the marina. And I knew a couple guys there and started working the area, and it was fun. I ran into my buddies at Culver City often, and it was kind of funny because they're driving their hoopties and I've got a county car and we're having coffee and stuff. So it was fun hanging out down there.
Marina Del Rey sounds like one of those stations where you can, I'll call it the best of both worlds. If you want quiet bedroom community, high-end luxury living, you can get that side of the city or that side of the station.
Sure.
And then you can, like you said, Ladera Heights and the low end of the city.
Yeah. It was not uncommon where we'd get a call to take a burglary report or something like that, where you have to actually go on someone's boat, because a lot of people lived in their boats in the marina. So here I am from a ghetto station. I'm climbing into a boat, taking paper on a burglary. It was very different. It was fun, but it was different. So.
And this is how many years in total now with the Sheriff's Department?
So almost 3.5, around there somewhere.
And are you starting to think about a specialized assignment at this point?
I'm not. Paul, I was still a young guy. I think I was 27, 28, still having a great time in patrol, playing cops and robbers. The idea of me taking on a specialized assignment didn't really come to mind. I know they were looking at me to becoming a training officer. So there was talk about that. In fact, that probably would have happened when I came back from that temporary assignment. And the way the culture is at the Sheriff's Department, if you do want to get a specialized assignment, what you had to do at the time, you had to become a training officer. You had to have at least 2 trainees. And then you'd had to work, I back up a bit. Before you became a training officer, you'd have to work as a jailer at the station. After that, you have to work the desk, what we call the watch deputy, where the watch deputy pretty much runs the watch. With the Sheriff's Department back in those days, sergeants really didn't run things. They supervised, but they didn't run things. That's not the culture. The deputies at those stations ran the shift. And a lot of the sergeants, when they recognized that these guys know what they're doing, they would just back off. Call us if you need us, and I'll just observe. But you guys know what you're doing, handle it. And for the most part, that worked out pretty well. So after working those 2 slots, then you'd become a training officer, and then you have to have 2 trainees, and then you could start putting in for specialized assignments either at the station level, like DB, or go outside and do arson explosives or whatever you want to do. But even then you have to interview for it and stuff. But that was the process back then.
So if you were the golden child, you're still probably at minimum looking about 6 years before you're going to get into a detective assignment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, some of the students at the college, often ask me, what do I have to do to become a homicide detective or a detective, period? I said, well, it depends where you go. If you go to a small department, you could probably make detective in maybe 4 years. If you go to some place like LAPD or the sheriff's department, it could take 6 or 7, depending on where you want to go. So yeah, there's a number of steps you have to go through before you do it. So yeah, so that was at the time, that was my career aspiration, is that, okay, I'll do the training officer gig, and then after that, we'll see where it takes me, where I want to go. So, and that's kind of leading up to the incident that kind of changed my career. So what I'm about to tell you and your listeners is kind of a nightmare scenario. It does have a good ending at the end about what ended my career and how I transitioned over to a second career. So there is life after policing. Even if you have to leave early in your career, there is life after policing where you can find work that is meaningful. You can make a difference in people's lives. And so I want the listeners to know that is very possible, even if your career gets cut short for whatever reason, or even if it doesn't get cut short and you want to do something else after you retire. So here we go. August 13th of 91. I'm working PM shift by myself. And I'm getting off work. My shift ended at, I think, 10, around there somewhere. I'm in the locker room, taking my gear off, getting ready to, go home. With the sheriff's department, what they do when an officer needs help call is put out, they broadcast that not just on the radio, but in the station itself over the PA system. At the time, Marina Del Rey did not field a lot of radio calls. I think we had 2 cars in Ladera Heights in the county area and 2 in the marina, and that was it. If you were in trouble in Ladera Heights, you probably would have Lennox cars roll. They probably would get there faster. So getting undressed, a deputy needs help call comes out.
Your body is built for more energy, more focus, more strength. But if you're feeling sluggish, unmotivated, or mentally drained, it's time to make a change. At Human Performance TRT, science meets convenience. Their hormone replacement therapy, weight loss programs, and mental health solutions are all designed to help you feel and perform at your best without ever leaving home. They offer medical-grade hormone optimization, weight loss support with personalized health coaching, and ketamine therapy for depression, anxiety, and trauma, all guided by qualified mental health professionals. HPTRT is veteran and first responder owned, and they make it simple to optimize your health. There's no locked-in contracts, and if you're already on a hormone program, switching is easy. There's no extra test if your blood work is under 6 months old. Ready to take back your edge? Go to hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off. That's hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off your entire program. Stop waiting. Your peak performance starts now.
And I knew there weren't a lot of people working that night. So I thought, screw it. So I just real quick threw my gear on. I wasn't completely undressed, but I threw my gear on, ran out to the parking lot, found a trainee. Come here. We found a car we jumped into, and off we go. And the help call was 2 deputies were at a house in Ladera Heights, a training officer and his trainee. A suspect, a person, showed up at his mom's house and was basically creating she was terrified of him. This guy had a history of violence. The family got a restraining order against him because they were afraid of him. The neighbors were afraid of him. And he was there trespassing. He wasn't supposed to be there. When the deputies confronted him, they saw that he was armed with a buck knife that wasn't positioned on his side. It was right in front of him. And he had a fanny pack on. And he would not leave. When they tried to arrest him, he said, "Don't come close." And he made a statement about, you're going to meet your maker, basically threatened him. And so the deputies didn't approach, and they put out a help call. So we get the call, and we're just hauling ass down the SR90, and we're getting updates on the radio. So it was put out that he was a 5150 and possibly under the influence of PCP.
PCP days.
Yeah, PCP days. Yeah. So we're getting updates. We're hearing all this stuff. And then he's armed with a knife and he's got a fanny pack and he hasn't been searched yet. And he's just not being cooperative at all. In fact, he threatened him. We had a helicopter above, and that comes into play a little bit later on in the story. And the way Ladera Heights is on Slauson, you've got duplexes and triplexes on the north side of the street. It's difficult to find somebody there if they're asking for help. So we had the air unit. We asked the air unit, hey, can you, I'm shop number 325. Can you guide us in where they're at? And he did. So we get there, we show up, and I've got this trainee who I don't know. And he tried to grab the shotgun out of the rack. I said, no. It's not going to be, we're not going to use that. So we go in there, and a couple of other deputies showed up, and a supervisor showed up, a sergeant. And this guy's about 6'1", over 200 pounds, big guy. We didn't know this, but he had a history of violence with LAPD. I learned this later on. They had tried to arrest him 6 months prior to this for a burglary. They got into a fight with him, and they almost shot him. They were losing the fight, and they damn near, they thought about shooting him. Neighbors were afraid of him. His mom was terrified of him. That's where she got the restraining order, and he was not leaving. So we kind of formed a skirmish line, and the sergeant comes up with a plan. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, have an arrest team, 2 deputies that are going to be designated shooters. So if he reaches for that knife, you're going to pop him. And then the sergeant had a taser. Now, these are the early days of tasers.
The rabbit ears?
Yeah, I think there's rabbit ears. Yeah, they weren't the sophisticated stuff we have today.
Oh, God, I remember those.
And only a sergeant carried tasers back then. So he's out there. We set the plan up. I was part of the arrest team. So the sergeant goes up to him and says, hey, I need you to lay down for me. And this guy says, basically, F you, I'm not going to do it. So he hits him once. No effect whatsoever. Hits him a second time. Nothing. Somehow the trainee gets into a physical altercation with the suspect. The suspect punches him in the face and knocks him down. And he was one of the designated shooters. So the gun falls out of his hand. We run down this short sidewalk in between the buildings, and eventually a couple of deputies tackled them. So I run up to him, and I'm at the guy's head area. So you have one deputy on one leg, one deputy on the other leg, and this guy's just flaying around, trying to push himself up. As I run up to his head area, he sees me. He reaches out with his right arm and grabs my leg and locks it in. And then with his left hand, he reaches underneath his waistband. The sergeant's over here somewhere, and he's trying to get a hold of the guy's bicep. And he said it's like concrete. The guy's it's not moving. So he's locked me in, and other deputies are standing off to the side. They're not involved in this fight. So when he reached underneath his waistband, I immediately knew what his intent was. I've seen people get stabbed before on 2 occasions where I was right there and I saw how fast it happens. He's now using the leverage, trying to pull himself up. So he's kind of doing this, trying to climb up as he's got leverage. So his back and upper body are kind of arched this way. And no one's doing anything to stop this guy. It's not working. They're not be able to control this guy. So I give him a warning. I say, hey, he's got my foot. He's got my leg. And then I knew exactly what he was trying to do. I said, I'm going to shoot him. It was kind of a warning to other deputies, get out of the way, because no one was doing anything. And I thought any minute he would take that knife out, because why is it in his crotch area? Most people carry it when they use it for utility. It's on the side of their hip. At any minute, I knew that knife was going to come out and he was going to stick me with it. So everyone clears away. I shoot. I hit him 3 times, almost point blank range. And another deputy off to the side fired as well. So he let go. I pulled away, and then the team came in and handcuffed him, and he passed away probably, within a few minutes, he was dead. So now we're, typical officer involved shooting where you have guys involved. Oh my God, that was close, and this and that. So we're talking and stuff. The original deputy that got the call came up to us and said, hey, I captured it all here. He's pointing to his shirt pocket. I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, I tape recorded the whole thing. I said, what? He goes, yeah, I had a tape recorder running. I taped the whole thing. I knew this was going to happen. None of us knew he was video or audio taping it. And these are the days where body cameras were, any cameras were not around. And at first we thought, oh, but then we thought, no, we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't say anything wrong, nothing inappropriate. I'm glad you taped it. So we kind of all, gather around. And then this is also relevant. One of the deputies goes back to the car to get some gloves, to search him because he was a mess. So they search him. They take the knife away from him. They search his fanny pack, everything else. Paramedics get there, pronounce him dead. They transport me back to the police station or sheriff's station. Homicide detectives show up and they do their interview. And it was pretty straightforward. That was it. That was the second shooting I had been involved in. I was involved in a shooting at Culver City. I kind of knew the routine, a little different circumstances back then. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, I get a call. Hey, we need you to come in. You're being relieved of duty. What? Yeah. So I come into the station. The captain meets me. So she said, yeah, you're being relieved. It came from headquarters. Sorry I had to do this, but you're being reassigned of all places to the weapons training facility up at Saugus. And so I'm starting to worry now, what's going on? So I call ALADS, our union rep, and get them involved. And what had happened during this time, in the month of August, the sheriff's department had 4 fatal shootings, one after the other. I mean, 1 week after the other. If you remember, or I don't know if you remember or not, but back in the summer of 91 in August, the sheriff's department had 4 shootings. One was in Carson. The other one was in Lakewood. The third was East LA. And then we were the 4th in Ladera Heights. And I think East LA was first. Anyway, all fatal. So we get relieved of duty, and the deputy at the Lakewood shooting, he gets relieved of duty, and we get reassigned. Now we're being paid. We still have to show up for work.
You're on admin leave.
We're on admin leave.
Or not even admin leave because you're still working, but you're off the street.
Correct. Yeah. And
now you said we. So of your shooting incident, was it you and other deputies?
The other shooter.
Okay.
Which I didn't know. I didn't know this person. I just met him that night. So they relieved 2 of us, and then I think the sergeant was reassigned because ultimately he got demoted over this. And then the deputy at Lakewood, he gets relieved of duty too and reassigned. So my head's spinning. What is going on here? And apparently it was right after the Rodney King incident. That happened in March of 91. This happened in August. There was some anti-police sentiment out there. Not like it was or is today, or it was a couple of years ago, but it was still out there. And so the sheriff's department was trying to figure out how we deal with all this controversy going on. This is one shooting after another, all fatal. One suspect, I think, was not armed. The other 2 had a gun, but tossed it, something like that. But anyway, so they're trying to figure out what to do with all these 4 shootings. It's on the news every single night. They're making us out to be trigger happy killer deputies and all this, that same stuff.
I mean, I'm not trying to make light of it or be sarcastic, but what you're saying for the large part is exactly what's portrayed on the media today. It's
Correct.
Nothing new.
Yeah, it's nothing new. And it's one of those things where I thought, I just don't understand. I don't quite get it, why this is happening. So the DA gets involved. So they have a DA rollout team that came to the scene and they do their thing. And you work for the DA's office, you know how that goes. And I'm thinking, they're looking at this as an out of policy shooting. The guy was armed. He made her reach for it. I couldn't back away. No one was doing anything effective. So I popped him. It's within policy. And now the DA's looking at it and I'm thinking, what's going on? Anyway, I had friends in the DA's office, and about a week or 2 later, word got back to me. Hey, we've listened to the audio tape. It's a clean shoot. Don't worry about it. one of the allegations that was made by a so-called witness neighbor was that we planted the knife on this guy after we killed him. What he saw was a deputy leave the scene after the shooting, go back to his unit, come back and lay something by the body. Well, what he was seeing was a deputy going back to get his gloves on. That was confirmed by the audio tape. In fact, the DA had to put out a statement early on saying, we doubt that happened. That's not what we're looking at here. So we go through the whole, what's going on. So I'm reassigned. I'm working at the Weapons Training Center and waiting for this thing to play out. And then was it November, October, we find out that the DA, who was Ira Reiner at the time, he addressed all these 4 shootings. And he came out with a public statement that I thought was pretty good. He said, look, we're looking at all these 4 shootings by the sheriff's department. And if there's any wrongdoing, any criminal wrongdoing, we'll address it. He said, however, we're not going to charge anybody just because there's a public outcry about this. We're not going to do that. Okay. But then they come out, we're going to give all these 4 shootings. We're not going to make the decision on it. We're going to let a grand jury do it. Grand jury? That's not the process.
Not what you want to hear.
Not what I want to hear. So I'm not sure where you worked in, was it San Bernardino County area?
LA County.
Riverside, LA County?
I started my career in LA County and finished in Riverside County.
Yeah. So the process was for many, many years, the DA would make the decision himself. That's it. Grand juries in California and LA, typically they're formed for the purpose of indicting somebody. I knew the history of grand juries. And I remember I was sitting down to lunch, getting ready to eat. And when the word got to me that all 4 were going to a grand jury, I immediately lost my appetite because I knew this is not good. And again, word got back to me. Don't worry about it. They're not looking at this as a criminal act. Don't worry about it. I'm going to a grand jury. He goes, yeah, all 4 of them are. We get invited to the grand jury to testify. And so by that time, ALADS had given me a labor attorney and a criminal defense attorney. So we're strategizing. Do we go or not go? Are we walking into a trap here or what? And they said, look, we've talked to the DA. They're not looking to indict you. It's a offer if you want to testify or not. I said, you're sure about this? He says, yeah, we're pretty sure. And now I'm hearing the same things. And I thought, let's do it. So we get a date, and the deputy I was with that night, who was also the shooter, we showed up one day, and then the deputies in the other shooting showed up different days of the week. And I think one guy, the Carson deputy, didn't testify. He didn't want to do it. So I'm there the day of the grand jury hearing, and I've got 2 people with me just for security. But there's no protesters. There's nothing like that going on. So they invite me in. They had a pre-interview with me, the DAs. And they said, okay, this is what we're going to ask you in the grand jury room, this and that. And I kind of got a feeling that this was not adversarial at all. Okay, so they walk in, they put me on the stand. Now, for those that are watching this, if you've never been into a grand jury room where you're the witness testifying and where you're the focus of this, it's extremely intimidating. Yeah, I'm sure working the DA's office, you've seen that. It's grand jury hearings.
It's very tight quarters, and it's very personal.
We had 23 people serving as grand jurors, and in LA County, it's on a 2-tiered bench that they're looking at you. You've got the jury foreman off to your left, and then in front of you, you've got 2 DAs that are asking you questions. So I was on the witness stand for about 2 hours. And I could tell right away, this is not adversarial at all. They just want, hey, just tell your story. What happened? And they were kind of guiding me a little bit, but pretty much I kind of, hey, this is what happened. And then after I testified, then what the process is, they let the grand jury members submit questions in writing to the DA, and then the DA actually reads those. to the witness on the stand. And I think we also actually, we played a training tape for them. That was a training tape of the sheriff's department that talked about the danger of edge weapons.
The 21-foot video?
It was called, I don't know if that, they talked about that. It was called Surviving Edge Weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a training tape.
They demonstrate how quickly somebody could close a distance.
They did. And they also demonstrated how easy it is for someone to pull out a folding buck knife and open it with one hand. So I testify, everything went fine. And then right before Christmas, a week before Christmas, I get a call from my attorney. He says, "Hey, Merry Christmas." What? He goes, "They cleared you. Everybody got cleared. All 4 shootings, they cleared everybody. No indictments, nothing." And I heard, this is anecdotal, 22-1 was the vote on my case, but all 4 shootings, the grand jury refused to indict us. I thought, wow, okay. So another month or so goes by, and then eventually the sheriff's department determines that, oh, this is an out-of-policy shooting. Not only yours, but the one in Lakewood is also out of policy. So they terminate us, and now we're thinking, oh, God, now what? Now, during this time, I'm still dealing with the trauma of this thing. I mean, I shot this guy point blank. Dave Grossman, in his book on killing, talks about distance or proximity in killing, and that the closer the distance is to the target, the trauma level goes up. I'm dealing with the trauma, even though I had been involved in a shooting before, that was at a little bit of a distance. I'm dealing with the trauma of the actual event itself, but then all the controversy and all the stuff going on, surrounding the event. And so I started seeing a therapist, and not the department's therapist. I had a very bad feeling about her. And I said, no, I don't trust her. I don't feel like talking to this person. So I started seeing a therapist from the union recommended.
I would imagine, to a degree, even back at that time, there was probably a lot of, I'll say, stigma to admitting that you wanted to even talk to somebody. But my question is more, and I'll let you, I'll let you follow up with that if you want to talk about the stigma aspect before the question.
I wasn't so much concerned about the stigma, because by then I knew a lot of cops that were involved in shootings, and this is normal. PTSD is normal. What was a red flag to me is that this full-time psychologist on the department, when I first met her, it was mandatory. You have to debrief. Anytime someone shoots your department, any department, even back then, you have to debrief at least once. When I first sat down with her, one of the first things she said to me was, "Yeah, I'm familiar with what's going on. Yeah, I had lunch with the sheriff just yesterday." That statement alone told him. The way she said that to me, I thought, I'm not telling you shit. I'll answer some questions, but I'm not going to tell you anything. I don't trust you. If you're having lunch with the sheriff, I'm not telling you anything. But I went through it like I was required to. And at that point, I started seeing a therapist that was recommended by the union.
And that was going to be my question, was the therapist that the sheriff's department used at that time, was it an in-house person or a contract person? You already answered it, an in-house person.
Yeah, in-house, yeah. They can afford it. I mean, they're a big department. They can afford it. So I was going through therapy, doing that. And then I went off on workers' comp, and we ultimately made a decision, the union and the lawyers involved, that, this is a bunch of BS. It was in policy shooting. So they start preparing for a civil service hearing. So that's the process for LA County, is that when anyone gets discharged as a county employee, you have a right to a hearing at civil service. So that's what we prepared for. And the civil service hearings were held in October, November of that year. So we prepared for that. And here was the interesting thing about the civil service hearing. I was still a bit naive, even at 28, being a deputy and peace officer foil. I was still a bit naive about the way things I think should play out and how agencies conduct themselves. So we go before the hearing officer and we present our case. We had called the coroner's office. They did their synopsis. We called the homicide detective, one of the detectives that was involved in the case. And then we called 2 use of force experts. One of them, the department's own expert that had retired recently, but he had worked use of force training center. All of them said, yeah, what they're telling you, what the deputies told you or told us is consistent with what other people told us, what the coroner's findings were. The guy was not laying flat on his stomach. It was arched because we could tell that from the autopsy. And what they did is consistent with use of force policy of the LA County Sheriff's Department. The department only called one witness, and that was the commander of the region at the time, who had no experience in use of force and was basically, as my lawyer called him, a bureaucrat with a badge. He was the only witness the department called to support their assertion that we violated policy. That was it. No experts. They didn't provide a alternate narrative or course of action that we should have taken. Nothing. They just put this person out there. Yeah, that it's out of policy. That was it. We did a demonstration in front of the hearing officer. This is what happened and how he was able to reach under his waistband. The hearing officer ruled in our favor, I believe it was January, submitted a report that everything on the merits of the case, everything was consistent with what everyone said. There's no conflicting stories here. Everything's supported by the physical evidence. And he ruled that based on the department's policy on use of force, this is within policy. He submitted his findings and recommendations to the Civil Service Commission, which is 5 people. They adopted the report and the recommendations in March. The department filed objections to some of the findings. The Civil Service Commission then looked at those objections. Our attorney made a rebuttal against it. And they were going to meet again. However, during that time, I believe it was 2 or 3 of the board members of the Civil Service Commission were replaced. And in LA County, they're appointed by the Board of Supervisors. Word had gotten back to us that at least one of the board members was replaced by a woman named Gloria Molina. She was a county supervisor at the time, not a friend of the police. They looked at the rebuttal. After these 2 new members were on the Civil Service Commission, they reversed. No, out of policy shooting. The new board members did not look at the evidence. They didn't listen to the transcript or the audio tapes or anything like that. So we had to appeal it to the Superior Court, LA Superior Court. Now a couple of years have gone by here, and I'm getting off workers' comp, and I'm kind of doing some odd things to kind of make odds meet. And I think at one point I filed for retirement because my therapist, after a while, said, "You can't go back. There's just no way." Later on, kind of cut to the chase here, in 95, 96, we finally get a ruling from the Superior Court in our favor that, yeah, this is an in-policy shooting. It's consistent with their own policy, the penal code, and Graham versus Connor, which she cited in her opinion, and that she ordered us back to work. But she said that, my understanding is both deputies have now retired, and there was also an allegation in there that was misconduct with the second Civil Service Commission. But she didn't address that. She goes, that's a moot point. And so she ordered us back to work. And so at that point, the department adopted it, reversed our status, and now we are so-called honorably retired now. And so that changed in our personnel file. They gave me credentials. They didn't give me a CCW because of the nature of the retirement, which is fine. I didn't care about that. But now I'm officially retired. Retirement went through. Our name has been cleared. The deputy in the Lakewood shooting, same thing happened to him. And he eventually went back to work. He decided, no, I can go back to work. I can do this. And so he went back to work, got back pay, and that was it. But Now we're into the transition period.
Well, real quick before you go into that transition period, you mentioned that you had already basically filed for retirement. So while this is going on, is it because regardless the outcome, you had already kind of changed in your head and your heart, this is no longer for me? Or even at that point, was it, all right, if I'm found that I'm cleared of all this, I'm ready to go back to work? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I know where you're going. My mindset at that point was, I don't ever want to be put in a position like this again, where if I have to shoot somebody, oh God, I better be 150% in the right here. It's got to be just a 150% clean shooting. Well, those don't happen all the time. A lot of them are in the gray area, you know.
You're probably Monday morning quarterback every single shooting.
Yeah, exactly. Every shooting gets criticized in Monday morning quarterback because, oh, you could have done something differently. And nowadays they're looking at, well, could you have done something to prevent it or position it differently? The shooting itself is fine, but could you have actually prevented it? That's the way things are today. But I was at the point where I just didn't want to be put in that position again. And, you know, my therapist agreed that this is not good for you, because I had some, you know, with PTSD, I know you're familiar with it. You've got physical things going on, and I had some trouble in some other areas. I just didn't want to go through that again. And at that point, I didn't trust the department either. Some of the shenanigans they pulled, I mean, just were outrageous. That I thought, wait a minute, you can't do that. You're a department. You shouldn't be taking training tapes off the shelf and claim, oh, they never saw that training tape. We never showed that in briefing. That happened. Didn't trust him. Didn't want to be put in a position where I had to use any use of force, especially deadly force. And the second shooting I had a little trouble with, but this one was a little bit different and more close up. And I thought, I just don't want to do it again. I just don't want to be put in that position. I love the job, but man, this could happen again. And then what? You know?
So you had already crossed a bridge. Regardless of the outcome, you were going to be stepping away from law enforcement.
I did. I made that decision that I need to go. As heartbreaking as it is, I need to go, because what I didn't want to do, what if I do go back and I hesitate? And it's not just my life in danger, it's somebody else's life in danger. I've seen too many shootings where two people are partnered up, or at a single officer, where they hesitate, and they hesitate way too long, and they end up getting hurt by it. And I didn't want to be that person. I thought, I think I'm done here. So at that point I thought, oh, what the hell am I going to do? I remember watching your interview with TJ Webb. And at one point he thought, what am I going to do? That's all I know is law enforcement. You know, how am I going to do this? So I remember back when I was a CSO, I took a couple college classes at West LA College. A sheriff's deputy was teaching them, off-duty sheriff's deputy. And something clicked to me back then. I thought, you know, I'd like to do what this guy's doing one day. Just be a trainer or a teacher at some point, teaching criminal justice stuff. And I was talking to my wife when I said, hey, I really don't know what I want to do, but, you know, teaching kind of sounds cool to me. Maybe I could get into that somehow. So I don't know. I can't remember how this happened, but traffic school. This is back in the day where you couldn't take it online. You had to do it in person. So I approached one of the traffic schools in the area of the house. And I said, hey, are you guys looking for instructors? Well, yeah, actually we are. And we'll sponsor you. And the way it worked back then, you had to have a school sponsor you. And then you can go to DMV and take the test to become an instructor. So I did all that, became an instructor. And then as a traffic school instructor, you just deliver the curriculum approved by the state. So I started doing that, and I had no training in teaching, nothing like that, just what I saw and remember from in-service trainings. You remember when you were working, you had good in-service trainers and guys that totally were awful. And you learn from both. Okay, I'm not going to do that. So I started teaching traffic school a couple nights during the week and every other Saturday. And it was bare money. It wasn't anything really to speak of, but I kind of started liking it. And I had a captive audience. They can't leave. They got to stay the whole 8 hours to get their certification from me. And so I tried different things and I had some good feedback. People would tell me, hey, you did a good job and thank you very much and this and that. And I wasn't there to bust their chops. I mean, it's punishment enough they had to give up 2 nights or 1 whole Saturday to be there. So it's more of a conversation I had with them and some other stuff. But anyway, so I did that for a number of years and I started getting better at it. And I thought, I wonder if I could teach college. And I just made a cold call. I made a cold call to LA Mission College in Sylmar. And I said, hey, are you guys looking for instructors? Well, yeah, actually we are. Send me your resume. Okay. Now, back in the day, this is how you applied for a part-time teaching gig. So I send this guy a resume, the chair of the department. I get a call back, I think a month later. Yeah, come on in. We'd like you to start teaching for us, criminal justice classes. Wow, I'm thrilled. So I get in there and I start teaching, typical criminal justice classes at the community college level. It happened that easy. And after a while, no one, and here's the thing, I think you taught some college classes. No one taught me how to teach. You're here's the curriculum, they give it to you and you're off on your own and that's it. So I was doing, what works, what doesn't, kind of trial and error. And the more I did it, the more I liked it. And I had some good feedback. And that was 1998 when I started teaching part-time there. So backing up a little bit, when I start doing the transition, figuring out what I'm going to do after law enforcement, I knew for me, okay, I don't have any skills like vocational skills. I said, that doesn't really appeal to me, but I do need an education. I had a couple college units. I said, I got to go back to school. My wife and I talked about it. I said, hey, look, this is going to take a few years, but I need to do this. I'm going to land somewhere, but I need to get some education. And she was very supportive, very supportive.
Sponsorship for this podcast comes from Brothers in Arms USA. They're a veteran-owned and operated clothing and accessories brand that's 100% American-made. Every piece tells a story of brotherhood, respect, discipline, and honor, deeply inspired by those who serve, those who have served, and those who have paid the ultimate price serving our great country. Whether you're an outdoor enthusiast, a proud patriot, or simply somebody who values high-quality American craftsmanship, they've got something for you. Go check out brothersinarms.com, spelled out fully, brothersandarms.com, and use the promo code TRANSITION20 to get 20% off your purchase.
So I got my associate's degree. From there, went on to a bachelor's degree, and that's when Mission College hired me to teach part-time. And then I went on to a master's degree at Cal State LA. And a great experience. The culture and atmosphere at that time for that department wasn't anti-police. I know in law enforcement, a lot of times we look at academia and we think, oh, they know the stuff from a book. They're not practitioners. They don't get it. They're judgmental. And that wasn't really my experience working at the college or at Cal State LA, because it was a criminal justice department. It was a little bit different than other humanities areas. I do my 2 years at Cal State LA, had a great advisor there that advised me on my thesis and everything. It was great. Never had a problem. It was good. A year and a half later, he calls me out of the blue. Hey, you ever thought about teaching for us? No, I never thought about it. He goes, well, you want to come back and teach for us part-time? Sure. And that's how easy it was to get invited to go back to a major university. And now I'm teaching university classes at Cal State Los Angeles. And I remember passing that university as a kid, going to the Explorer Academy, looking at it. Wow, it's a major university. And then here I am, how many years later, I'm actually working there teaching classes. And so I stayed there for about 16 years. And then a tragedy happened at the college where I was promoted to an acting dean position. We had a dean, Darlene Montez, and she didn't show up for work one morning. And come to find out, she was murdered that morning by her father. as she was stepping out the door. We were shocked, totally shocked. And now the college leadership is scrambling. What the heck do we do? Now, by that time, I had been working full time. I applied for a full-time gig in 2007, and I was running the department. I took a couple leadership positions on campus doing projects and stuff. But when that happened, I reached out to both the vice presidents of the area. I said, hey, look, whatever you need, let me know. So we go for about another day or two. I get this call out of the blue from one of the vice presidents. Hey, what are you doing right now? I said, oh, I'm just getting here to campus. He goes, well, come by the office. Now, I knew Danny was close friends with Darlene. They'd gone to school together. And I said, what can I bring you? He said, your enthusiasm and an open mind. What the hell does that mean? So the whole campus is going through mourning about losing Darlene and the way we lost her. She was very well liked. Another friend of mine called who was a dean. And she said, hey, did you get a phone call from Danny? I said, yeah. Well, I just got sent for. Well, so did I. What'd you do? What did we do? We're in trouble or what? So we go to the office and both VPs are waiting for us. They said, hey, we'd like you to be an acting dean. Take over Darlene's spot until we figure out what the heck's going on. And you think about it. You know, don't have to give us an answer today. I said, no, I don't think about it. I'll do it. I was an acting dean for a little over 2 years. They extended me a year. And then after a little over 2 years, we had a new president come in and she wanted to bring her own people in. And I get that. I totally get that. And so I went back to being a full-time faculty member, which is where I am today. So I think one of the messages that I'd like folks to take away from this is that, number one, you know, there is life after law enforcement. At least there was for me. And that for me, the road was getting an education, you know, going to college. That might not be for everybody, but you can find something meaningful and purposeful in a second career. You may take a while to figure it out. It took me a little while to figure it out, but I landed in a good spot and people helped me along the way. And then I was positioned that I was ready for opportunities as they came up. And a lot of these were out of the blue. They caught me by surprise. So I think being ready for those opportunities, positioning yourself so when those opportunities do come up and you get blindsided by them in a good way, that you're ready. You're ready to take on that work. Because if I didn't have a master's degree, I couldn't be a dean. That was a requirement they couldn't waive. So that's kind of how I transitioned into a second career. But I was still able to dabble in criminal justice stuff. All of my staff I've hired, except for one person I've hired over the years. People from the FBI. I've got people from the DA's office, Sheriff's Department, LAPD executives, someone from Santa Monica Forensic Science Unit, a number of different disciplines. And I was able to bring those folks on to deliver the curriculum that we have. So I've had a lot of pleasure in not just working with them, but at the end of the day, what really makes it meaningful is that the student population we serve, they need assistance. They're not rich. We serve the North San Fernando Valley, and we are a predominantly Hispanic serving institution. And a lot of these folks need guidance and support because they kind of know what they want to do, but they don't really know how to get there. Surveys tell us about 60% of our student body in criminal justice want to be law enforcement. The other 40, a mixture of probation, forensic science, those areas. And so they're hungry for information. So when they take a class with one of our staff, man, here's Paul. This guy has done the work. He's not just an academic, but he's a practitioner. He's been there. And they're so hungry for information. It just makes you feel good that you're kind of setting them on the right track. And not just being an instructor, but a mentor as well. Extremely satisfying for me, even to this day. I've got a few more years to go till I retire. But that's one of the key things I want folks to walk away from is that you can find purpose and meaning in a second career in law enforcement and be very satisfied with it.
Taking you back to while you're still waiting for the civil board hearing to make their decision. You mentioned that you had a conversation with your wife and you said, hey, school is going to be something that I have to go back and do.
Yeah.
Did you start going back to school while you were still waiting for that decision to happen?
I did. I went back to College of the Canyons in 93. I think 93.
So you were starting to put the pieces in place because like you said, you had already kind of, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, you had already in your mind said, regardless of the outcome, I'm no longer going to be in law enforcement. I want to step away from it. So you started putting the pieces in place.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned teaching for the traffic school.
Yeah.
You used the term beer money.
Yeah.
Was there any financial compensation once the sheriff's department came back around and said, hey, our bad, we're going to retire you formally, but were you still not receiving any type of pay post that?
The only pay I was getting was workers' comp. And that was only good for, I think, about a year at the most. And after that, that got cut off. And then they put me through, it's not retraining. It's a service that you go to. This was all done through the union. They have you go through a company that tries to retrain you in a different other type of line of work. It's lowball stuff. It's entry level stuff. So I did that for a little bit. I think the longest run I had, I worked as a PI under somebody else's license. This was a person that was a CHP captain. And he and his wife were running this business on the side, who I became fast friends with. And then we would do PI stuff. And so I did that for several years. But I knew it was a dead-end job. It's not going to go anywhere. As nice as these people were to work for, it was a business they ran out of their home. And I knew I can do better than this. This is not what I want to do the rest of my life is this stuff. But it served a purpose because at the time, the work they gave me, it was pretty flexible. I could do it whenever I could fit it in my schedule. And at that time, my parents were going through some serious health problems. So I needed to go there and take them to doctor's visits and stuff like that. So I'd find myself in a doctor's office waiting for them, studying for a test or something for college, making the most of my time. Yeah, it was, I look back and I thought, how did I get through all that stuff? Dealing with my parents' health issues, dealing with my department stuff, and then going to college. And, again, I thank my wife. She was very supportive with all this stuff, and she knew where I was headed. So, she really hung in there. So she's a keeper.
That first venture into going back to college and getting your degree, because you mentioned you had taken a couple classes before that, but you obviously didn't have your degree.
Yeah.
Your undergrad degree is in what? And in conjunction with that, now that you've had time to look back in your time as a dean, as a professor, would you have gotten a different degree if you could?
I think so. All my degrees were in criminal justice, either administration or theory. But I wanted to get through school as fast as I could. I just needed the paper, the credential. That's all I wanted. I learned some things along the way, but looking back, I'm a history buff. The main stuff I read are history and biographies. And looking back, I kind of wished I probably did my bachelor's degree in history instead of criminal justice. My master's degree, criminal justice, it was good. But yeah, looking back, maybe minor in history for my bachelor's degree. At the college level, a lot of times they don't care what your degree is in, as long as you have the paper and you've got the experience. That's most of the time, that's all I care about. But since I was am a history buff, I kind of thought it'd be kind of nice to get a degree, a formalized degree in history, what I'm interested in. But yeah, that's not the route I took. And actually, I played with the idea years ago. I should go back and just get an associate's in history. And I thought, nah, I'm not going to do that.
Now, all of your time at the instructor level at the college level has
Yeah.
always been in person, or did you venture into the online aspect?
Yeah, so it was mainly in person up until COVID. We had a few online classes, but it was something that I didn't want to get involved in. But COVID changed all that. And so we were forced, both at Cal State LA and at the college, to transition to online teaching. So we all had to go through a crash course in delivering online instruction.
So even prior to COVID, they didn't have a very robust online platform?
I wouldn't call it robust. They had some. And back then, it was still the in-demand format was in person. Some people don't do well in online classes. It's a different animal altogether. And you've got to have a lot of self-discipline to keep up in an online class. So for our population demographics, they wanted in-person stuff. Going into COVID, yeah, we had to learn it whether we liked it or not. And I remember at Cal State LA, they gave us a lot of training because I was still teaching at Cal State LA when we went into COVID. But then about, what was it, Darlene passed away in September of 2019. And so that's when I became a dean. So I was a dean at the college, and I told them, I said, look, I teach part-time at Cal State LA. I'm not willing to give that up. That's part of the deal here. And they, yeah, no problem. Do your part-time thing there and just make up the hours when you come here to campus. And they were very good about that. But eventually, as we got into COVID, I thought, I might be a permanent dean here. And I don't know if I can handle teaching part-time and being a dean, because being a dean, it sounds sexy. It sounds wonderful, but if I could equate it to something, it would be something equivalent to what a sergeant deals with when he first becomes a sergeant. So when at Culver City, same thing, I'm sure where you worked at, if you got hired as a sergeant, you got dumped on. I mean, you just were, after work, you were still doing paperwork, filling out reports for the next day, sending them up the chain. And that's a normal day. If something critical incident happened, oh, forget it. You're going to be there, for 12 hours doing this stuff.
And that's where your mindset shift has to come in.
Yeah.
You equate it to a law enforcement agency. When you step into that next level of management, you have to realize that your days of being the go-to or getting involved in law stuff have gone.
Yeah.
Now, granted, you could still end up in a specialized unit being the sergeant of that, but you're still not going to be leading the investigations. You're still going to be supervising teams.
Sure.
I would imagine then, like you mentioned, when you become a dean, yeah, there's the status title of it, but you're not teaching anymore. You're not, for the most part, you're not getting to interact with students and get that benefit back to you.
Correct.
So you could look at it negatively, I'm losing out, I'm not able to teach anymore. Or you could look at it positively and say, what can I do to make this department better? Not only for the students, but for the other instructors. It just depends on what mindset you want to bring to the table.
And I think you're spot on, because as a dean, you have a different responsibility. You are a formal supervisor now. You're not teaching at all. And the power structure, you've worked at a college before, the power structure at a college, it's very different. The way it is in California, by statute, is the governance of the college is a shared responsibility between faculty and the administration. So this is kind of a real quick example. This is how it works. So you and I are at, Yahoo PD, and we get an order. Hey, Paul Kelly, I need you to go out there and do this. Aye, sir. If you get that same order at a college, I'll think about it and get back to you. That's the mindset. And there's not a lot they can do unless it's in the contract that you have to do this. You can make a request of faculty all day long. And if it's not specifically written in the contract about your duties are, they can blow you off, and there's not much you can do about it. So as a dean, a lot of times you're kind of softball arm wrestling and cajoling and schmoozing. And how do you do that to get people to do what you need them to do? And somehow it was natural for me, though. When I walked into that position, I go back to my days at Culver City when I worked for this particular chief and his leadership style. I adopted that when I was a dean. And one of the things that is severely lacking at a lot of colleges is recognizing people for the good work they do. Some departments, sheriffs were not that good at it back when I was there. I've heard they've gotten better. But our chief was really good about recognizing the good work people did. So I thought, well, I can adopt that and practice that here while I'm a dean. And so if someone had a good evaluation, I would give them a separate letter saying, hey, I just had the privilege of doing your evaluation, blah, 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 and then copying the area vice president on it. It's something they can put in their file when they go for a job. Hey, look. Or if they did something out of scope that was necessary to get the job done, I would give them a commendation. Nothing that says I have to do that. And it's rarely done in a college environment. But it's something that they can use down the road. And it's something that you need to do, I think, as a leader, is to let your folks know that you're appreciated. And all the people that worked for me when I was a dean, they're all young folks. I mean, some of them were student tutors. And I thought they've got to realize that, what the work they're doing here is meaningful and it should be officially recognized. So as a dean, it was fun getting to exercise a lot of the leadership practices of my former chief and bring those to the college. And so I was able to do that the whole time I was there. That was the most fun. I did have to discipline people. That goes along with the job. But I wrote far more commendations to folks than I did, kind of letting people know, hey, don't do that. So it was a learning experience. It was a great opportunity to work as an administrator in that environment. And I'll always be grateful to the two people that put their trust in me to do it. So it was a good experience. And again, I was positioned to do it both formally and my reputation on campus. They trusted me. So when that opportunity came up, I was able to take it and run with it.
I would say that from my experience, given the opportunity to promote and move into that leadership position, I'm all for it. Came to me very late in my career. I'm glad that I did it. I wish I would have done it sooner.
Yeah.
But I had experiences, like you said, both in my law enforcement time and in my time as a college instructor. A good dean will change the culture of that program. Yeah. And I worked for some good deans who fielded complaints. You never heard about it.
Yeah.
Buffered you from what the school, the admin of the school wanted, all of that type stuff. But being able to...
They must have been ex-cops. Sounds like it.
Actually, no, not all of them were, but they knew how to be good leaders. But the thing is that I want to hit something that you brought up is you didn't go looking for a teaching job per se.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that if you're sitting in law enforcement today, you're a veteran and you're interested in teaching, the first and most important thing is have a true desire to want to teach people and work with people, because your patience is going to get tested in working with a group of students.
Yeah.
But something that maybe you can expand on in the sense of hiring today, somebody who has an interest, part of it is literally just reaching out to a college.
Yeah.
Hey, do you have an opening? Not necessarily waiting for it.
Yeah.
Anything you would advise as far as what you've seen come through as for people looking to get hired, what you looked for?
Yeah, that's over the years, that's been kind of a frustration of mine. Over the years, I've interviewed both as a faculty member and as a dean on hiring committees. You have these folks that come through, and they don't have to be criminal justice. We've had hiring committees with other disciplines. But in criminal justice, though, I've had folks come in that I want to interview for part-time positions. And sometimes we'll give them a teaching demonstration, sometimes we won't. But you get the sense pretty quickly when you've done a lot of interviews in your career, is this person doing this for the money, or do they really like the art of teaching and they really want to pass on their skill set to the next generation? And then you try them out for a semester. Okay, I'll give you a shot. Let's see how you do. And this happened recently where we had a person that I mentored or coached this person to build this person up. So he or she was going to teach for the semester. And it was a disaster. And I thought, what happened? And I can only surmise that this person may have been in it for the money only. And I sensed a little bit of less than being honest in some of the things that I asked this person about. And I thought, I wish I could tell people ahead of time, when you get that call and you come in for an interview, here are some of the things you can prepare for when you're interviewing or you're going to be teaching for an academic institution. Because we've had some successes. I have people on my staff, but I've had a lot of people come in, cops, prosecutors, that just were, no, I get the overall sense this is not a good fit. You're going to cause me trouble. You've interviewed folks and you get that gut feeling.
Well, on the flip side, I've had people ask me when I was teaching, hey, so how much do you make?
Yeah.
And my answer was, I never actually sat down and plotted out my week of the time that I invested in the class.
Yeah.
In relation to my paycheck.
Right.
Because I never wanted to know how little I was actually making.
You're making minimum wage.
It's a nice side hustle.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it for the money, the time investment is not going to weigh out. You've got to truly enjoy teaching.
Exactly. And that's why I tried telling him. I said, listen, I'm hiring folks. Yeah, the money, on the face of it, without, like you said, breaking it down, it's very generous. But I want someone to come in that's not looking for a paycheck or beer money. I want someone to come in that really has the enthusiasm to guide these students. Most of them are kids, 18, 20-year-olds. They're kids. You've got to have the enthusiasm and not just go through the motions. That's what I'm looking for. And so about a year or so ago, I'm getting closer to retirement. I've got about 2 or 3 more years to go. I thought, I wonder if I could write a book on this stuff, just geared towards helping folks that either still want to work full time as law enforcement and want to do a side hustle, or that are transitioning to a second career. So I looked out there. There wasn't much out there to speak of, and I did some homework, and I thought, all right, I'm gonna write a book on this stuff, a short book as a guide. Hey, if you've ever thought about teaching a part-time class, you being a probation officer, judge, whoever, it's geared towards criminal justice professionals. Here's the roadmap on what you can do to get that opportunity. How do you put yourself out there? So I took about a year to write it, and then published it about a year ago. And then it's on Amazon. You can Google or go on Amazon and get it. It's teaching for criminal justice professionals. It applies to other disciplines as well. It applies to military folks too that are getting out of the military, especially if they were doing some type of law enforcement work in the military. It's kind of a roadmap. Okay, here's how you go about getting a part-time gig at a college or university teaching criminal justice classes. And there are things you can do to network, get on an advisory board. How do you do that? I talk about the story about teaching traffic school. Other areas, how do you prepare for an interview, and how do you prepare for a teaching demonstration, which you might be asked to do? You've been to in-service trainings, college classes. How many trainings have you been to where people just rely on a PowerPoint and read from the slides? Death by PowerPoint. It happens way too often.
Does it still happen today?
It happens a lot in academia. And you would think that professors would be beyond that. But you see it a lot in academia where professors, both full-time and part-time, will put up a PowerPoint slide during their lecture, and it's all text. You can't pay attention to what your professor's saying because you're too busy writing down what's on the screen. And then before you can finish it, he goes to the next slide. And so in the book, I tell folks, I said, look, here's some recommendations. I recommend some books in the text that you can learn the right way to deliver the material, be it PowerPoint, a flip chart, handouts, whatever. I don't go into great detail about it in the book because that's not really the purpose of it. It's about how to get a job, not how to teach.
Well,
But I give
and
some
also too,
recommendations.
you have to develop your own teaching style.
Everyone has their own teaching style. Exactly. You have to develop it as long as you know the basic good practices of how to deliver the material. It's whatever style you want to use. And so I give those recommendations in the book about other resources you can get on, catch on to. But the book primarily is dedicated to folks that are transitioning from a career in law enforcement or criminal justice to how to get these jobs if they really are interested in doing that type of work, where they can really make a difference. Like I said, you're guiding the next generation of criminal justice practitioners. And I would go so far as to make the argument that folks have a duty. You spent 30 years in law enforcement. I think you have the duty to pass on what you've learned because that's how you learned. People taught you as you came up as a young person in law enforcement. They took the time to train you or teach you some of the things that are going on in today's world. So yeah, I would make that argument that folks have a duty to teach the next generation of students coming on board. And a great way to do that is to teach a college class, criminal justice, either community college or university. The one thing that folks might ask is, oh, they're so liberal there. Oh, I'm a law enforcement guy. I'm gonna have to deal with these liberal people that just don't understand. Criminal justice is different. That hasn't been my experience. At the community college where I work at, and then where I used to work at Cal State LA, I've never had an experience where academics looked down on us because we were ex-cops or ex-probation or DAs or whatever. That's not been my experience. We are well respected like any other academic on the campus. So, yeah, that I don't see that as a concern, at least in the two places that I used to work at.
My only rebuttal to that would be is if you have an interest in teaching at a given college, whichever one it is, and maybe you get on board and maybe you realize that the administration of the college is more liberal than what appeals to you.
Sure.
I would go back to the thing of being that buffer, though. How about going the opposite direction? If you've got young men and women who are sitting in these administration of justice classes who want to be in law enforcement,
yeah,
who's best to teach them?
Exactly.
Somebody who's going to be compliant to, and I'm not saying that you go in with the attitude of, I'm going to fight the system, but just be that buffer.
Yeah.
Take what the administration's sending down, all right, but still impart good quality knowledge to the future of law enforcement.
And we've had that. We've had some crazy stuff happen on campus, stuff that I am definitely opposed to. One of the conversations that came up recently is some faculty are very concerned that ICE is going to come on campus and start dragging students out of classes. And they're serious about this. They're about their concerns. I'm sitting back. I'm listening to this because I'm on certain committees where I have to show up and I have to indulge people sometimes. And I'm listening to this stuff and I'm thinking, it's not going to happen, but whatever, just say what you have to say and we'll go on with it. So there's a lot of stuff that I've let go, just crazy stuff, demonstrations on campus, nothing radical, but just issues that I personally do not agree with. But I'm of the mindset, and I'm older too, whatever, it doesn't affect my area. Do whatever you want to do, but as long as it's not affecting the area where I work in, I'm good. There's stuff that goes on in the police department that you may not agree with.
That's exactly what I was thinking. There's so much stuff that goes on in our organizations that you learn to pick your battles. You learn to know what you're going to let and let not bother you.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got the power to do that. Yeah. There was stuff in the sheriff's department in Culver City. I don't agree with that. That's stupid, but okay. And we'll do it. Or maybe it doesn't affect you that much, or whatever the case may be. At a college campus, you have more freedom to say, hey, as long as you're not dealing in my area and with all this nonsense, do whatever you want to do. But yeah, I don't agree with it, and I'm not going to participate in it. Just don't bring it in my area. And for the most part, that's the way it's played out. I can't think of one instance where some radical faculty member started trouble in our area. I don't think it's ever happened in the 20 odd years since I've been there. It just hasn't happened. I think because they have some respect for us and we stay in our lane, we don't get involved in their stuff. So don't bring trouble over here. I think it's worked out pretty well for the number of years. So I know some law enforcement, when they go to an academic institution, they're a little concerned about that, that it's too liberal. Well, yeah, but just tune them out. Don't listen to the noise. Just focus on what the mission is for our area, and they'll be fine.
Going back to you personally, as far as working through your trauma, have you been able to resolve that?
I have. Yeah, I resolved it many, many years ago. I still have a file of some of the paperwork, like the civil service hearing and some of the legal documents. The shoot book I don't have anymore. But I kind of keep it up there. If something comes up, which rarely does, I might go in there to refresh my memory. Like coming in today, I wanted to refresh my memory on certain events when they took place. But yeah, I've resolved them many years ago, and my wife reminded me of this too. She said, and I agree, hey, you kind of reinvented yourself after the department, and you're in a much better place today, than what you were, 30 odd years ago. And you just focus on that. You're in a position where you can give back to others. And so in our program, what we started a number of years ago, we started our own scholarship where we have money donated to a special fund in our program. And so now we have the ability to give out scholarships just to our students that are majoring in criminal justice. We sponsor a student every year for Christmas that is down on their luck. They might be housing insecure. And so we'll sponsor one where the whole staff gets together and buys presents, toys, whatever for the kids. So you see stuff like that and you think, okay, it's not related to instruction necessarily, but look at the support we're giving to this population of folks that really need the support. So it feels really good that you're making a positive difference and you're having those positive interactions with folks. As opposed to law enforcement, most of the encounters we have are pretty negative. When the cops show up at your house, usually it's not a good thing. And people react.
Unfortunately, most people don't call 911 and say, hey, I'm having a wonderful day. I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So it's been a very fulfilling career. It's been good to me. I've worked with a lot of good people. And surprisingly, a lot of folks in our campus at the college are pro law enforcement. The sheriff's department provides security for our campus. And recently, and for all the 9 campuses in our district, and recently the Board of Trustees was presented or confronted with the idea of, do we still want to keep this contract with the sheriff's department? Because after the George Floyd incident, there was this whole thing about police on campuses. Oh, they're intimidating. We don't want them here. LA Unified got rid of their campus dedicated cops for a long time. I think they're just starting to come back, I think, on a limited basis. But at our campus, they send out surveys to all the campuses. What do you think? Do you still want the sheriffs that are armed on your campus as a presence? And our college overwhelmingly said, yeah, we want them here. We don't want private security that don't carry weapons. No, we want sheriffs that have peace officer powers. And we work well with them. And so the overwhelming vote was to keep the sheriffs on our campus. So they always have a presence there, and they're armed, but they work really well with our faculty and administration. They're welcome there. And so criminal justice, the same thing. So yeah, it's been a positive experience. And yeah, I look back and I thought, even though I had to transition to another career, it's been very good to me. I've had the freedom to do a lot of things in criminal justice at the college that people in other jobs don't have the freedom to do. And I can't think of anything else I'd rather do.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thanks, Paul, for inviting me.
As always, thank you for listening or watching the episode. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out on social media or send me an email. The links are all in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're not already, please follow the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube. And if you would, please leave me a rating. Ratings do two things. You can tell me what I need to fix or improve, and the more ratings also gets the podcast recommended to more people. Another ask, please share the podcast with anyone you think could benefit from and enjoy it. And last, don't forget, sign up for the newsletter.